Hello everyone and welcome back to the Night Pasta. I know a lot of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be fun if everyone left a comment to let me know where you're listening from in the world. Also, like and subscribe if you're enjoying the case. Right, let's get comfy, relax, and begin story 1. I look at the sign over the door, Beauville Historical Society. My new home. I am now an artifact, a historical thing. How have I gotten to be this old, this obsolete? Does anyone even use grinding wheels anymore to sharpen things? It has been a long time since I have felt anyone's hands on me. Prior to coming here, I had been sitting in a dusty old barn for years, unused, unloved. That is, until someone decided to move me. A tattooed young man wearing an earring, a stranger to me, threw me in the back of his pickup and brought me here, dropping me off unceremoniously at the front door. He then sped away as if he were relieved to be rid of me. I have to say that hurt my feelings. He slammed me down and didn't even say goodbye before speeding away in his monster truck with the jacked up wheels and loud muffler. I try to look on the bright side. No use crying. Tears might make my metal frame and seat rust, although my heavy stone will be no worse for the wear. Chin up, I tell myself. At least now that I'm here, occupying a place of honor by the front door, perhaps I will be looked at and admired if not used. I look around and spot other artifacts nearby, my peers. The first thing I notice is a horse plow, the kind that has a platform, really just a metal square, for its driver to stand upon while he steers the horses. I remember back in the day when my master had one just like it, pulled by giant strong horses, a breed called Percherons. I remember it was a long, slow process. The horses were very strong, but sometimes hard to control. Nevertheless, the plow did a remarkable job, plowing deep, even furrows in the rocky soil. Next to the plow, there is an ancient piano, with scrolled curlicues and whorls carved into its polished mahogany woodwork. There is no rhyme or reason to this crazy museum. Outdoor farm equipment is jumbled together with indoor furniture and other sundry items. The piano's deep, dark, polished wood is still in good shape, but the ivory has worn off its keys, making the keyboard look like a person with blackened or missing teeth. I suspect the piano needs tuning. I wonder if it even can be played. It looks like the kind of piano that has been sitting for years in someone's dark basement, with mice possibly making a nest inside. Alongside the piano, I spot a spinning wheel with a foot pedal, an ancient freestanding gas oven, and stove with spindly legs. A roll-top desk, along with an inkwell and feathered pen missing some of its quills. And other ancient worn items too numerous to mention. Like the spinning wheel, I also have a wheel, a circular, thick, heavy stone. The wheel is activated by a foot pedal, which causes it to spin and sharpen things into a fine point. The person doing the sharpening has to bend down and press the object firmly into my wheel for an extended period of time. It's a little bit like riding a bizarre bicycle. The ride is sometimes long and arduous. The user has to be patient, giving rise to the old saying of keeping one's nose to the grindstone to achieve good results. Back in the day, I was used to sharpen knives, axes, saws, really all kinds of things. It has been a very long time, however, since anyone has used me to sharpen anything. I honestly can't remember the last time I felt cold metal of any kind pressing into my hard stone. I am now over 100 years old, but am still in great shape, if I do say so myself. Still firm, solid, I can still sharpen with the best of them. I stand ready and willing to sharpen whatever comes my way, although I should have learned my lesson, based on my past mistakes. I wonder idly if anyone cares about my abilities. What will they write on my informational placard? Will anyone even read it? Every object in the museum has a brief description displayed. I imagine the curator of the museum probably will stick to brief facts. How old I am, who owned me, what kinds of things I sharpened long ago. I think my viewers deserve a more exciting story, however. They deserve to know the truth. I should really write that story myself. Maybe I'm a tad conceited, but I would like everyone to sit up and take notice of what I can do, the results that can be achieved with a sharp tool or weapon. The results you see are really quite astounding and deadly. Once upon a time, a very long time ago, I sharpened something to a very fine, edgy point. That point was used for something dangerous. Although I am proud of my abilities, I must confess that I feel somewhat guilty about the whole thing. I guess you could say I was an accessory to a crime. My master, we called him Big John due to his immense size, came to me one day for service. He bent over me for hours, keeping his nose to the proverbial and actual grindstone, sharpening his favorite knife into a razor-fine point. The knife had a long, hooked blade. He kept it in a black leather sheath in the pocket of his overalls. It didn't look like the kind of knife a farmer should carry. It wasn't a knife for whittling, or cutting branches or barbed wire, or even gutting the catfish that swam in our creek. No, that knife was a weapon he kept in his pocket just in case. Big John was a hothead, you see, the type of man who always believed in carrying a weapon, convinced that he might one day need it. He was also on the prowl, not for a perceived enemy, but for a wife. He was convinced that the farm needed a woman's touch, convinced he needed to sire some children to carry on his bloodline. He was somewhat of an old-fashioned man, wanting an adoring little woman and a whole passel of children surrounding him, working alongside him on his beloved farm. To achieve his goal, after a long hard week farming, one Friday night, he took himself off to town, spiffed up in his best overalls. The knife occupied its usual sheath in his pocket. Big John had his eyes on a young barmaid named Sarah. Sarah was the daughter of the tavern's owner. She was a buxom blonde, cheerful and friendly, serving her customers with alacrity and a bright smile. She seemed to be a hard worker, keeping up with the demands of a rowdy, thirsty crowd effortlessly. Clad in a low-cut frilled blouse and a flouncy skirt, she immediately caught Big John's attention. Being a practical man and a farmer, he noted with approval her broad childbearing hips, swishing along as she carried a wooden tray filled with heavy steins of beer. Usually, she could deflect the wandering hands of intoxicated, grabby men who got overly friendly when she served them their beer and whiskey. One man in particular, an uptight, prissy banker with a gray comb over on his bald head, would not take no for an answer. Forgoing her usual politeness, she slammed down his beer and turned hurriedly to leave, knowing that he would undoubtedly try to detain her. Sure enough, the man's whiskey breath was hot in her face, and he grabbed her around the waist. "Stop, sir. I need to get going." She forced a smile to dull her sharp words. "What's your hurry, darling?" he slurred, grasping her tighter. She once again tried pulling away, to no avail. For a man who sat behind a desk all day, his grip was surprisingly firm. Big John, who was sitting one table over, felt fury rising in his chest. He stumbled to his feet and quickly stomped over. "I believe the lady told you to remove your hands, sir," he choked out the last word. In his opinion, the man did not deserve to be treated like a gentleman. The good manners his mama had instilled in him prevailed, however, forcing him to be marginally polite. "What you gonna do about it, farm boy?" the man sneered. Sarah squirmed in the man's grasp, trying to pull herself free. Big John saw red. "Who you calling a boy?" "You, of course," the man said coolly. "I'm no boy," Big John spat. Suddenly, he pulled the knife out from its sheath in his pocket and brandished it menacingly at the banker. The man at last dropped his arms from around the barmaid's waist. "Whoa there, big fella. No need to get violent. Put that thing away." Big John continued to hold the knife. All at once, the banker's hand shot out like lightning, and he knocked the knife away from Big John. The knife clattered to the floor. The bar room was suddenly silent, its customers frozen in stupefied fascination at the scene rapidly unfolding in front of them. Both men bent at once to pick up the knife. Being smaller and more agile, the banker was the first to reach the weapon. He raised it in the air triumphantly, the knife's sharp metal gleaming in the candlelight, emitting an eerie glow. "Give me that back," Big John yelled. "Never," screamed the banker. The two men were now struggling over the knife, Big John trying unsuccessfully to wrestle it away from the banker, who was surprisingly strong for a skinny middle-aged desk jockey. In one last desperate attempt, the banker brought the knife down forcefully, stabbing it into Big John's thickly muscled chest. Big John made a horrible gurgling noise and fell heavily to the floor, the blood pooling around him. The metal part of the knife sank deeply into the big man's chest, only its black handle protruding. Yes, my friends, Big John died. I am sorry to say that my sharpening skills led to his demise. I never saw that coming. It still tears me up inside. When I first heard the news, I shed a few tears. Someone had to wipe me off with an old towel. They wondered if the barn roof was leaking at the time. Luckily, I didn't rust. Big John was a good man. May he rest in peace. He was only trying to protect his lady love. Maybe if the knife hadn't been so sharp, he might have lived. But no, he bled out like a stuck pig. His parents buried him at the base of the big hill, down by the creek, on the farm, resting on his beloved land, the land he had hoped one day to pass down to his children. Sarah, the barmaid, came to his funeral. The children they might have had together never came to be. The knife, I am sorry to say, was never recovered. I don't know whatever happened to it. I am sure its point is just as sharp to this very day. I still feel guilty about the whole thing. My own pain cuts like that knife. When I do something, I do it right. Big John was the same way. If only he hadn't kept his nose so long to my grindstone, it's possible he just might have lived. Story 2. I'm not crazy. This story contains mentions of mental illness, blood, and murder. You'll have to talk to him about that one. You still think I'm lying, don't you? You're judging me. You think I'm some kind of monster, right? I can see it in your eyes. I can hear it in the way you're reading these words. Like, you think I'm crazy. You think I'm just making this up, trying to get out of something I did. I can feel it. You're judging me, aren't you? I can hear you saying it in your head. He did it. He's guilty. He's crazy. Well, guess what? You're wrong. I'm not crazy. You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to be in here, to be in my head. I'm just trying to explain it to you. You need to listen to me. I didn't kill her. I didn't. It wasn't me. You have to believe me. You have to trust me. You think it was me because of the blood, don't you? You think I'm the one who did it. You can't see it, can you? You can't see the other parts of me, the other selves that take over sometimes. They want things. They want things that I don't, but I can't always stop them. I try to stop them, but they don't listen. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It was just supposed to be a normal night. It was. I swear it was. Karen and I were supposed to have dinner. You think I'm lying, don't you? You think I'm lying about the dinner. But I'm not. We were fine. We were talking. She was upset, of course, like she always is. She had that look in her eyes like she wanted to say something to me, like she was about to tell me what an asshole I was. She always looked at me like that when she was angry. Always. But I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't. She was the one who wouldn't stop. She was the one who couldn't just let it go. Why couldn't she just let it go? Why couldn't she be quiet for just 1 second? I didn't do it. I swear to God, I didn't. I was just sitting there, just sitting there. I was trying to be calm, trying to stay in control. I remember looking at her. Her eyes were wide and she was screaming at me, her hands waving around like they always do when she's upset. But I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I'm not like that. I'm not. 3 didn't want to hurt her. But then, I don't know what happened. There's a gap. There's a gap in my memory, a hole. I don't know how I got from the couch to the floor. I don't know why she's lying there, bleeding, her body so still. I don't remember how I got the knife. I don't know where it came from. You think I'm lying, but I'm not. It wasn't me. It was someone else. Someone else. You can't understand. You can't understand what it's like, can you? To have someone else inside you. To feel their hands moving, their thoughts swirling in your head, and then suddenly you're not the one in control anymore. Do you understand that? Do you get it? The voices, they're always there. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they shout. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they want, but they want things I don't want. They want blood. They want noise to stop. They want to take over. And I can't stop them. You're thinking that I'm making excuses, but I'm not. I didn't want this. I didn't want her to be like this. I didn't want to kill her. But it wasn't me. It was them. I remember the knife again. How cold it was. How sharp. It felt so real in my hand. The blood. It was everywhere. How did it get everywhere? How did it spread so quickly? And now I'm standing here with you. I'm talking to you. I'm telling you the truth. I didn't do it, but I did. I must have, but I didn't. Did I? No, I can't keep doing this. It's like I'm slipping. I'm slipping again. I can't remember. What happened? What happened to her? She's gone. Karen's gone. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't want her Tono. No. Don't think that. Don't think that. I didn't do it. I didn't. But there's so much blood. So much blood. Why is there so much blood? Why is it on my hands? Why can't I wash it off? I try to scrub it away, but it won't come off. It's not coming off. It's not leaving me. You think I'm crazy. You do. I can hear it in your head. You think I'm crazy, and maybe I am. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I've lost my mind. Maybe I've lost control. But I didn't do it. I didn't. I swear, I didn't. I just need you to understand. I just need you to listen. Listen to me. Listen to me, please. Karen's just sleeping. She's just sleeping. She'll wake up any minute now. She'll be fine. She'll be fine, won't she? She has to be fine. I didn't do it. I didn't. You've got to believe me. I didn't. But two have to, don't I? I have to believe it. I have to believe that it wasn't me. Two didn't do it. But I must have. God, what did I do? I'm not crazy. There's just so much blood. God, why is there so much blood? You believe me, don't you? You believe I didn't do it? You're a liar. I can see it in your eyes as you read these words. You think I did it and you think I'm crazy. I should have known better than to try and explain it to you. I'm not crazy. The voices are crazy. The others are crazy. They talk about this stuff. I would never kill her, right? She's just sleeping. She'll wake up soon. As long as the blood stops pouring over the carpet, there's so much blood. They are the reason for this blood, okay? Not me. I'm not crazy, okay? Story 3, The Underground. Martin's life was slowly becoming boring. He felt he had fallen into a monotony and didn't know how to get out of it. Studies, casual work, and sleep were the only things he had in his life. Sometimes he needed something more, but he couldn't give up anything because he wouldn't survive. He resigned himself to such a fate. Despite his young age, he felt old. He switched on his phone and started browsing Facebook. As usual, most of his friends had children, were getting married, and some had even managed to get divorced. And he had nothing. Not a wife, or children, or himself. Life had completely sucked him in, and he didn't know how to get out of it. He sighed loudly and got out of bed. He dressed and brushed his teeth. He put his bag over his shoulder and went to the university. He couldn't even afford a good car. Maybe it was depression, maybe an age crisis before his 30s, or maybe laziness. He didn't know what to call it. He was studying history. That's the one thing that turns him on. Discovering old histories, mysteries. Probably every teenager dreamed of uncovering a mystery and becoming famous. Martin still dreamed about it and still believed that he would succeed. You have to be patient. Today, he listened to a lecture on the decomposition of the old underground, located in the old town area of Zamość. It was a small town, but one with a rich history. He learned a lot about it. Once a year, the underground is opened up and made accessible to tourists. It is not known why, but this city attracts many Asians as tourists. He even had the opportunity to look into this underground once, and really, it was worth it. There were even the mummified corpse of some priest who had an important role for the city. He was delighted with this tour. He still remembers it fondly. After the 2-hour lecture, he had had enough. A hard day awaited him. In the afternoons, he worked as a waiter in a well-known bar called Beer is Fuel. He hated it. Every time he went there, he wanted to cry. This is not how he imagined his adult life. He wanted a job, a satisfying job, not the first better shit to survive on. The people, the customers, were very ungrateful. They sat like these sacred cows and expected the waiter to kiss their feet just because they came to eat in this pub. This is some kind of mockery. Of course, he looked for another job, but it's not that easy. Everywhere they are looking for people, young people, who have a few years experience, preferably a dozen years. This is the reality in Poland. He wasn't surprised by his friends who left the country to earn money. He had thought about it himself, but couldn't reconcile himself to the thought of not finishing his studies. It was his dream to have a diploma, a bachelor's degree, and a master's thesis. As he was finishing his shift, a suspicious type poked him behind the shoulder until Martin fell over. He stood up and looked suspiciously at the guy with the long gray beard and bandana on his head. He looked like a typical motorcyclist. It was possible that he was one because he was dressed in black leather, which added to the menace. "What is it?" Martin said and scowled slightly. "Let's not beat around the bush," he said. "I've heard you're a good historian, and you know the entire map of the sewers and underground in the old city. Do you want to make money?" Is it legal? Please give me more details because I don't know what this is about. Guest, the point is simple. You get 3 million. Don't go into details. Just do what it convicts you to do. Are you taking the job or not? Martin, without thinking, agreed. 3 million, jail, black job. Tempting but risky. All in all, he didn't even know what he was supposed to do, but it didn't look very colorful. A menacing guy in leather knows that a student knows the map of the underworld and wants to use it. I wonder how. That was something he was about to find out. 2 hours later, they were in the underground of the old town and taking the mummy out of the coffin. Why do you need this mummy? Martin spoke up and took a step back. It was nice working with you. I hope we will meet again sometime. By the way, a certain collector was interested in it. The man smiled and handed Marcin a suitcase filled with money. I wish you success in life, he said, and left with the trophy. Moments later, Marcin booked a ticket to Majorca, knowing that his life was beginning anew. Martin dropped out of university. He did it a bit against himself, but to what advantage? He opened his company, which he was incredibly proud of. He didn't have to do it after all. He was a millionaire, but Poe's porridge would have gone sooner or later. Someday his children, if he had them, would be able to take over his business and they would have a good start. Besides, sitting on his arse so much and doing nothing was not a good solution. After all, he could get even more money than he has. It just needed to be well thought out. He was happy. He was so damn happy that he wanted to kneel down in the middle of the city and shout thank you and be grateful. It didn't matter if people would stare at him or not. What mattered was that he was happy. Do you understand? His life has finally changed. He can finally walk proudly on this earth, but that's right, there is one but. Now, he had to be careful about his choice of women because he had already noticed more than once that many were hanging around him. Swayed, yes, but because of his money and not him as a man. Sad but true. He sat comfortably on the deck chair and relaxed in the sunshine. Suddenly his phone rang. An unknown number. He had no idea who might have been calling him. Hello, remember me? The guy in the beard and black leather. Underground. I told you we'd meet again. I've got a good job. The rate is higher than before, but the amount I paid you now, the guy pays as an advance. You'll get twice as much. Do you take it? I smiled. Story 4. A drink with friends. Connor sipped his beer, doing his best to console his friend Keith, who had just had his divorce finalized today. He hadn't planned on Keith getting so drunk so quickly. Tim and Bob were no help. They were getting just as trashed, sitting next to Keith at the bar. Connor nursed his beer while he fingered the pill in his shirt pocket. He was a little frustrated. He had other plans for tonight when Bob called and begged him to come out with them. Just as he began to formulate a reason for an early exit, he felt someone fill the seat next to him, opposite Keith. Is this seat taken? A slightly husky voice asked. Connor turned to his right and was pleasantly surprised to see a very pretty girl now sitting next to him. Her thick dark hair was pulled back into a wavy ponytail. Her tan skin was flawless. She had hazel eye that seemed to sparkle in the bar's dim lights. I'm Connor. Welcome to the bar, Connor said with his brightest smile. Are you here with anyone or waiting on someone? Who's that? Keith asked, looking past Connor and at the new arrival. I'm Jana. She started to introduce herself when Keith cut her off. No one asked a chick to sit with us. It's our party. Keith raised his beer. No girls allowed. Don't mind him, you're fine. Connor leaning forward to cut off Keith's view of Jana. He just got divorced today and is blowing of a little steam. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Jana said, looking into Connor's eyes. I hope I never have to go through that. She dropped her eyes and added, but I'd have to get married first. Connor reached out and stroked her shoulder, gently squeezing it. You are very pretty. I'm sure someone will snatch you up. Jana slapped his knee playfully, leaving her hand linger a little. In Connor's mind, a green light went off. He twisted in his seat towards Jana and away from his drunk friend of 20 years. With a friendly smile on his face, Connor tilted his head to the left just a little bit and spoke. You never know, you may even meet him in an overpriced bar with his drunk friends. This brought a laugh from both. For the next 2 hours, the two chatted back and forth, with an occasional interruption from Keith. His interruptions were alcohol-based life decisions. I'm done with women, no more. Another round of shot here, Kevin exclaimed at one point. I think your friend just came out of the closet. Jana leaned into Connor and whispered. Connor laughed and looked back to Keith and asked, Are you coming out of the closet, buddy? Hell yay, I am gay now. No more women like her. Keith looked past Connor and pointed at Jana. No more. No more. He added a little flip of his wrist, then turned back to Bob and Tim and made the same announcement as if they didn't hear his previous declaration. The three of them roared with laughter, then drank their shots. Jana and Connor continued to talk and gently touch each other through the night. As the energy between them grew, Keith became more intoxicated and vocal about his disdain towards females and towards Jana. After spilling his second beer, Connor realized he would have to abandon his plans and take Keith home, and it was going so well, he thought, looking at Jana. "I'm really sorry to say this, but I have to try and get this guy home," Connor said using his best sad eye look. "I don't want this to stop, I'm really enjoying it," Jana said, taking hold of his hand. "Yay, I could come back if you'd like. It will only take me about 20 minutes, he asked with a hopeful smile. Jana pulled a section of her long hair back behind her ear and looked up at Connor. "I could drive home with you." She then looked down and back up again quickly. "If that's okay?" Connor felt as if the gods were smiling on him now. "Sure, that would be great." Connor quickly reached into his pocket and pulled out the small pill he had in there. "Let's finish our drinks, then we can go," he said as he placed his hand over hers, dropping in the pill, and as he did, slid her drink closer to her. "She isn't coming with us. Just you and me tonight, Cons. What do you care you'll pass out in the car on the way home?" Connor told him, hoping to calm him down. "No, just you and me," Keith bellowed. "Dude, settle down before they kick you out," Connor said, then turned back to Jana to see if she had finished her drink, which she had. "Look," Jana said, her hazel eyes looking deep into Connor's. "He doesn't want me there." "No, he will pass out quickly, trust me," Connor pleaded. "If you are comfortable with it, give me your car keys. Wait 10 minutes, then meet me in the parking lot. He won't know who is driving." "Really, that sounds great." Connor slightly slurred. Reaching into his pants pocket, he pulled out his. "Here you go," he said quietly. "It's the black Honda parked on the side of the building." "Okay," she whispered into his ear and then gently kissed his cheek. "Forget it, I'm leaving," Jana then said loudly with a little wink to Connor and walked out. "Good riddance," Keith yelled, then threw his arm around Connor. 12 minutes later, Connor helped Keith walk out of the bar. Both men struggled towards the car that Jana had pulled up in. 20 minutes later, Jana pulled the car into the garage of Connor's house. Together, Connor and Jana carried Keith into the house. Connor led the way to his spare bedroom where they threw Keith onto the bed. "Why don't you get his shoes off and I'll meet you in your bedroom when you're done," Jana said, patting Connor on his chest as he leaned against the wall. "Sure." Connor's confidence was gone now. He was feeling hot and dizzy and very sleepy. "Wish I hadn't chugged that last drink," Connor thought to himself as he pulled off his own shirt and threw it on the floor. He removed Keith's shoes and decided that was good enough. He had other things to take care of. Walking to his bedroom, Connor bounced off the walls twice. He shook his head and tried to clear his vision. Pushing open his bedroom door, a hand grabbed his wrist and pulled him inside. He was spun around 3 times, then thrown onto his bed. His head still spinning, he felt his arms being pulled out from his body. His mind had failed to stop rolling around in his skull. He tried to make sense of what was happening. A cold splash of water seemed to settle his mind back to where it should be. He opened his eyes, blinking several times to clear his vision. He saw that she was sitting on his chest now. He attempted to twist his body around to throw her off, but found his arms and feet tied tight to the 4 corners of the bed. "How are you feeling, love?" Jenna asked with a smile. "Do you think this is the way Anna, Sherry, or even Kathy felt when you were on top of them?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Connor said with a thick tongue. "You don't remember putting the same pill you tried to give to me in each of their drinks, then driving them off in your Honda and raping them?" Connor's eyes widened as he realized that she had seen him put the pill in her drink. But it was empty when she left. A sharp slap across his face brought him back to his current fate. "Stay with me, limp dick," Jana screamed at him. "You nearly killed Kathy. You stabbed her under each breast like this." Jana then jabbed a knife under Connor's nipples, making sure only to stab deep enough to cut the skin. Connor arched his back in pain. Jana cinched her knees tight to hold on. The blood that had pooled on Connor's chest and ran in streams off onto the bed as he continued to thrash about. You also scratched the knife across Anna's throat. And with that, she pulled the knife slowly across Connor's throat. She then leaned in and lightly slapped his face. "Don't worry, my love. I am not going to stab you anymore." Jana then rolled off him and stepped off the bed. "Why are you doing this to me?" croaked Connor. "Why? You have the nerve," screamed Jana, "to ask why, you filthy rapist." "I didn't said, then stopped as he saw Jana leave the room. When Jana came back into the room, she was wearing Keith's shoes. She then stood on the bed straddling Connor. "What are you going?" was all he could get out before Jana landed the first kick to his offending appendage. A bright white light of pain exploded in Connor's mind as the agony rushed through his body. It wasn't until the 3rd kick that blood started to flow freely from Connor's crotch. Jana stepped up to his chest and leveled her last kick at his jaw. She was surprised and sickened at how loud the sound of breaking bones were. Jana then climbed out of the bed carefully, walked into the spare room Keith was sleeping in, and kicked the shoes off. She grabbed Connor's shirt off the floor and walked barefoot back to Connor's room. 2 weeks later, Janice sat at her kitchen table and read the story about how the grand jury indicted one friend for killing his best friend in a sexual rage. The friend had been the suspect in several rapes over the last few years. She closed the laptop just as her husband came downstairs. "Love, Elsie wants you to tuck her in." "Okay," Janice said, and kissed her husband before going upstairs. "Hey, Peanut," Janice said with a smile. "You ready for sleep?" "Yes, Mommy," Elsie said with a sleepy smile. "Okay, let's get you all tucked in so you don't fall out of bed," Janice said as she tucks her in. "Will you always take care of me, Mommy?" Elsie asked with eyes closed. "Yes, my love," Janice said and kissed her forehead. "Mommy will work hard to protect all the little girls in the world." Story 5. A not-so-normal day. It was a cold day and the gray clouds were laced across the sky. Sarah was pulling into her driveway. "I don't understand why the stores are so crowded. I can't believe that I had to stand in line for 15 minutes. And why is food so darn expensive nowadays?" Sarah mumbled to herself as she carried the last of the grocery bags into her small kitchen. She took off her jacket, threw it onto the couch, and started to put the food away when she realized she left the trunk of her car open. "Oh, man," she exclaimed, not wanting to go back out in the cold. She quickly ran back outside and shivered as the cool wind blew across her bare arms. She reached out to close the trunk and suddenly felt a cold hand press firmly against her mouth. "Don't scream," she heard a deep voice mutter. Her heart raced and she froze, not knowing what she should do. Then her adrenaline kicked in and she threw her head backwards into the man's nose. She heard a cracking sound and was pretty sure she just broke his nose. He swore and let go of her. Sarah turned and pushed him away from her with all her strength. The man, still clutching his nose and moaning, toppled over hard and hit his head with a thud on the edge of Sarah's car. He fell forward, with his head in her trunk where the groceries had just been. He didn't move. Sarah caught her breath and looked around. No one else was in sight. The man still didn't move. She reached out slowly and felt for a pulse. Nothing. He was dead. Think, she said to herself. Think, she mumbled again. She panicked and slowly heaved him into the trunk and slammed it shut. She didn't want to involve the police. After her unwarranted arrest for a DUI last month, she never wanted to see another cop. So instead, she ran inside and grabbed her jacket and car keys. "I'll just drive him out into the country a bit and leave his body there," she thought. "It was self-defense.it was an accident. I didn't mean for him to die. He probably would have killed me." The thoughts kept flying through Sarah's head faster than she was driving. Sarah drove for about an hour and then stopped to get gas before she got out to where it was more remote. The last thing she needed was to run out of gas, she thought. Today was already a crazy day. She pumped the gas. Her hands wouldn't stop sweating. She was trying to be patient as the tank filled at a painfully slow pace. She felt like everyone was watching her and wondering why she was so nervous. She put the gas cap back on and quickly got into her car. At the same time, a young man with dark beady eyes and a cap on his head jumped into the passenger seat and yelled, "Drive, drive." Sarah froze. What in the world? Sarah thought as she looked at the man, not planning on going anywhere. Then she saw that he was holding a gun as the light flickered off of it. He pointed the gun right at her and said in a rough, low voice, "I said drive." Sarah slowly started to drive, her hands shaking on the wheel. They drove for a few minutes and then he told her to pull off on a remote road. The man yelled loudly at her to stop the car. Sarah immediately slammed on the brakes and threw the car into park. She grabbed her keys and jumped out of the car and started to run, but the man was faster as he jumped out and ran to her and grabbed her arm roughly and yanked her towards him. She hit him as hard as she could, but he didn't even seem to notice. She tried to kick him, but he lifted her off of the ground and she felt like a rag doll, being swung around in every direction. He accidentally fired his gun and saw Sarah go limp and fall hard on the ground as the bullet entered the side of her head. The man swore and kicked the ground. He just wanted to steal her car, not kill her. He ran to the car and opened the trunk to see if there were any tools in there. He was thinking he could bury this woman and no one would ever find her. As the trunk flew open, he gasped and swore again when he saw the dead man in there. "What the heck is going on?" he yelled loudly. He slowly pulled the man out of the trunk and looked at the two bodies lying side by side on the cold, hard ground. The next day, as the sun shone down between the clouds, two policemen were standing in the same spot, looking down at the two bodies on the ground. It looks like a murder-suicide, the older cop said as he scratched his nose. Seems that way to me, said the younger cop, and he shuffled his feet on the dirt and he looked around at the scene. A dead man and a dead woman lying dead on the ground. The man had a gun held loosely in his hand. They both had been shot in the head. The car was close by, with the door and trunk open. The woman clutched the car keys in her fist. No one else was in sight. It must have been a lover's quarrel, said the younger cop. I'll never understand why two people who love each other can end up like this, said the older cop. They heard a siren and waited in silence for the ambulance to come. Then they watched the paramedics slowly put the two bodies in the ambulance and drive away. The two cops got into their police car and turned slowly around to head back to the station. Story 6, within touching distance. A few inches of snow today, and you can hear the crunch made by my brand new Chelsea boots. With each step, I enjoy this warming sunshine, something only a sunny day in winter could bring, that crisp feeling. I go to my usual coffee spot near the roundabout of the police station. That warm coffee juice on a crisp morning is to die for. Morning Graham, usual? Usual, Solomon, thank you. Solomon is the owner of Java Cups, a Jewish Brit who owns a few shops in West London. This was his first, so he still works here, relentlessly day in and day out. He pours me the coffee, I nod at him and cross the street to the station. As usual, I hand my badge in and follow the steps down to the interrogation room where PC Knowles waits alongside a new recruit. Morning, Graham. This is Training Officer Stiebel. He asked if he could join one of your interrogation sessions. Apparently your fame's doing rounds in school. He leans in to whisper. They're doing sign-up sheets so they can apply to see your, techniques. I smile, shake his hand, and extend my hand to the training officer. Flattered, detective, he says, with a starstruck face. Aw, for nothing. I try to put him at ease. What do we have here, then? They run me through the case. 20-year-old Albanian male arrived in the country 2 months ago and was arrested in connection to 3 burglaries and 1 stabbing in the neighborhood, the victim being in critical condition. Neighbors have described his looks, but CCTV cannot be traced to him in either location. Operating theory is that he knew different access points, hidden from the cameras. Theft has been reported on each occasion, but his property revealed no stolen items. Alas, the motive is clear on the burglaries, high-value items. The question remains about stabbing one of his victims. Resistance, maybe? Most robberies tend to be nonviolent. I walk into the room and see this young-looking fella staring down at the table in front of him. A baby face, in the true meaning of the idiom. He has a scar running down from his left earlobe to his chin. Hello, Alton. I'm Detective McKay. I'm here to help understand all of this. I see the scar. Is that from back home? He raises his eyebrows ever so slightly to catch a glimpse of me. He nods. I understand you deny any of the crimes you were arrested for, saying you were in various other parts of town. Is that true? Yes, he replies bluntly. I'm mesmerized by that scar. Do you mind if I get a closer look? He nods and turns his face. As I approach him, I lay my hand on his head ever so slightly. He resists at first, but ever so slightly. I rush out of the room. PC, check storage rooms on the high street. Room 204. Lock pass key is 280,381, his mother's birthday. Wow, says the young training officer. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Knowles. They got it. The knife was also found, left to soak in a bleach pot. I'm invited later that evening to join the station for a few after-work drinks. I politely refuse, as I have dinner plans with a friend, but I'm glad to help as usual. Ever since my new role, I don't have a police station to call home. I work remotely and help on cases they cannot crack. In a way, I enjoy this more as I'm free to roam the streets as I please, working freelance and having more ownership of my time. Later that evening, I arrive at Casablanca 10 minutes late, Fashionably, some might argue. I see John, waiting by the window as he raises his glass towards me. I leave my coat before a good old friendly hug. "Been a while, old dog." He greets me. "Haven't seen you since a couple of weeks before the accident. How are you keeping?" "Good, thanks. I'm back to work now. Just cracked another case." "Wow. That's how many since you got back?" he asks while munching on breadsticks. 12, I say with a sense of pride. "Yeah, it's been some comebacks since our days on the field. John used to be my partner before the accident. We used to track down London's most notorious criminals and try to crack the most complicated cases. Sometimes we'd win, sometimes we'd lose. My life, however, turned upside down 6 months ago when the wheels of my brand new car skidded uncontrollably on black ice and hit the wall on the M25. Having miraculously made a recovery after what the doctors described as a horrible concussion, the Met initially did not want me back. The waiter arrives and interrupts our small chat. "Yes," opens John. "Could we have a large lamb tagine to share, please?" The waiter nods. "Ah, and Graham, are you having a glass of wine or—" "No, not anymore," I reply politely. "I see, make that another one for me, fella, please." The waiter departs and John, through no fault of his own, as he didn't see me since the accident, is up to more interrogation. "So, I got to ask, mate, what is this superpower?" I laugh, but even I didn't know exactly how to explain it. "All I know," I say, getting closer to him, "is that ever since the accident, I can reach into people's short-term memory when touching them on the side of the head where the hippocampus is located." He spits his wine. "Get the fuck out of here," he says, half laughing, half intrigued. I reach my hand and ask him to lean in. I touch his left side of the scalp and I can see his whole day. Coffee and sausage roll for breakfast, diarrhea after, Louise calling to tell you she might not make this dinner, paperwork. "Stop," he yells and then quietens down. "What the actual fuck, mate? How is that possible?" I shrugged my shoulders. I had no clue. All I knew was that since I've hit that wall, I've uncovered some power to connect deeply with people and their memories. The waiter brings our food around and we start digging in. Ah, the flavors, they tickle all over. "See this memory thing? Yeah," he adds with a mouthful. "Bet you had this with Gemma when you thought she was cheating on you." I nodded. I wish I did. "Still haven't heard from her?" He presses on. "No, mate. Police said they tried to reach her after the accident to let her know that I'm at the Charing Cross Hospital, but she didn't return any message. My guess? She's off with that colleague of hers, Tahir, starting a life somewhere else. That bitch." I stopped to grab a sip of water as the spices were drying my mouth out. That night, we argued a lot over the whole deal. She kept saying it's not like that, they're just colleagues, that I'm jealous and paranoid. "How dare she?" John adds. "I know, right? I'm a detective for fuck's sake. I have a gut feeling for things like this." Anyway, next thing I know, I grab my coat, storm out, and take a ride down the motorway. Guess where that led me? It led you to 12 fucking solved cases by touching murderers, he says, raising his glass. I smile and raise mine too, and we cheer. The meal ends naturally and we make our way home. It was good to see him again. 10 years we spent together on the streets. Good man, John. A bit of a joker, but a good man nonetheless. I arrive to my block of flats and make my way to the lift. The ding of crossing the floors is giving tingles to a part of my brain. Ultimately, I'm on level 4. I see the new rug for the hallway hasn't arrived yet, but in a way, it's nicer this way. Less scum gets in fibers, easier to clean. I take my shoes off and walk and grab a Coke from the fridge. I throw some old receipts and see an old bottle of whiskey in the bins. Heavy kind, single malt, probably unfinished. Haven't touched it since that night. Probably the reason for the crash is I can't remember how much I drank then. Anyway, at the bottom of the bin may it remain. I snooze in front of the television watching some replays of today's football. The phone wakes me up. I glance my eyes at the alarm clock. It's only 7 a.m. I let it ring and decided to call later once I brushed my teeth and freshened up. It's Knowles. He wants me down again. I pack my stuff and make my way. Morning, Solomon. Usual, Graham? Usual, please make it extra hot. Today's a colder one. I grab my extra hot coffee and cross the street. I do the usual show of badge and walk down the stairs where Knowles waits with another youngster. I greet them both. This is Training Officer Junaid. He won the lottery yesterday. Pleasure, I say, shaking his hand. Now listen, Graham, this might be trickier, but if there's anyone that can help, it is definitely you. He says while passing me the dossier on the suspect. Early stage dementia. Had a carer who looked after him. Neighbors reported sounds of fighting 2 nights ago and the carer has not been seen since then. Knowles' theory is that some fight might have broken out and the suspect, who is just 31 years old, doesn't remember the details of the fight and whether or not he harmed the carer. I walk in and I can see the guy shaking. I don't know where I am, but I haven't done anything, I promise, he pleads. Look, I know the condition is not helping, I say, trying to reassure him, but we need to get to the bottom of this. This young lady is missing and you're the person that saw her last. Would you like to help? He nods aggressively and insists. Yes, sir, I'll do anything, please. I just want home. Okay, I continue. Here's what's going to happen. I will touch you gently on the head and it will be over soon. I want to try something. He nods and lays his head down for me. I touch him and things are very muddy. As opposed to the previous times, this one isn't clear and I am concentrating very hard trying to decipher. Sir? It's been a while. What are you doing? He asks. Shh, let me think here, please, I say as I close my eyes trying to get a clearer picture. I keep concentrating and the images are still hazy, but I can deduce some things. I see some fighting and hitting and then a freshly dug ground outside a shop. Yellow Tools shop, maybe? I rush to the PC and tell him what I've seen. I'm not 100% sure though, Knowles. Don't know where that is. Junaid is Googling on his phone. He found one 7 miles from here, in Slough. Okay, thanks, Graham. I'll call you back once I know more. Sorry, it's usually clearer. I hope it helps. I say as I put my coat on, ready to make my way home. It's past lunchtime and I'm on the couch just doing Sudoku and listening to some old tunes. I haven't heard anything from Knowles yet, so I'm starting to feel very frustrated. Did my powers vanish or lose potency? And if so, what am I going to do? What will happen to my reputation, my job? I start to stress out and I'm heading for the bin, looking for that bottle of whiskey, hoping to calm the nerves. No, I stop myself before reaching for it. Not going back. I give up on the intrusive thought and feeling still tired, I launch myself in bed, where I nap profusely until a phone call wakes me up again. It's John. Graham, are you home, bud? He sounds urgent. Yes, mate, what's up? I say, still feeling a bit hazy from the nap. Mate, it's Gemma. She's been found. Another call comes in, interrupting my current one. It's Knowles. John, I'm glad, mate. Look, Knowles is calling. This is urgent. I have to take it. Mate, but Gemma? I hang up and accept Knowles' call. Graham, we followed your lead. He sounds grave. Yes, and? Found the carer? I ask, trying to get some reassurance. The carer showed up today at work, but... He takes a pause and a deep breath. We're going to come see you. We found your ex-girlfriend, covered in blood and wrapped in a rug. She was dug in the ground by Yellow Tools. We need to ask you some questions. Please stay where you are. The phone call ends abruptly and my hands feel clammy. I froze. I couldn't believe it. Could it? I rush to the bin. Fuck not drinking. I pick the bottle up. As I pour myself a glass of it, I see my hands bloody. The whole bottom of the bottle is... It all came back to me. Story 7. Coming together. Helene had trouble connecting to the joy that many were convinced possessed them during the holiday season. It was one of the many reasons she rejected the idea of attending any festive gathering. She had not celebrated a single holiday in 10 years, a tradition she was proud to continue, mostly because it had become less of a tradition and more as a method of self-preservation. Her methods of crafting her best personas could come under scrutiny if she caught the attention of the wrong party guest. Unlike other events she crashed, she would have even less control over who made contact with her. It was a time for togetherness, after all. That means that one person who usually blends in with their lack of social ties would inevitably stand out in the room filled with people closely acquainted with one another. It was much safer to keep to herself and let the holidays pass while she stayed comfortable in her cozy apartment. But she had given herself a gift this year, a job, a challenging but incredible opportunity that was best attempted while everyone else in the room was getting drunk and distracting one another with their dull conversations. She strutted up to the glass doors of the Clark Gallery, where two large men in white suits stopped her from advancing any further into the building. Helene flashed them an innocent smile as she pulled out a thick piece of stationery with elegantly written golden letters cascading on the white background. The Clark Gallery invites Lisa Kemper to the privately hosted holiday exhibition on the 23rd of December. The event begins at 7 p.m. Helene's eyes drifted to the bottom of the paper. Invitation required for entrance. The men nod and allow Helene into the space soon to be swarming with the most prestigious and elite guests. Of course, they would have authentic invitations instead of forgeries. But it just goes to prove that no place is inaccessible if you are resourceful enough. Helene pulls off her dark red overcoat and hands it to a man with a forced smile. She knew the look all too well. A caterer passed by with a tray full of flutes of champagne. Helene grasped her perfectly manicured fingertips around one to take with her as she drifted through the room. There were already about a dozen guests scattered throughout the different sections of the gallery. Still, Helene preferred it to be more crowded so she would draw less attention to herself when she does her work. During the next half hour, a steady trickle of privileged people in fancy suits and dresses passed through the glass doors, each taking their turn being praised by the host of the event. Helene recognized many of them. There were 4 CEOs, 7 politicians, and at least 5 media personalities. There were also several pretentious and overly smug people who Helene immediately identified as lawyers. Maybe she should ask for a few business cards while she was here, although she was confident she would never need them. It suited her just fine that the prominent pillars of the community were here to stand witness to her plan. It was a brilliantly simple plan. She would love an audience. A loud burst of laughter at the entrance pulled Helene's gaze, along with many others. The district attorney himself glided into the room, his shiny black shoes stepping onto the white marble floor. A shiver went through Helene, not because of the district attorney himself, but because she recognized the person who followed directly after him. A dirty, blonde, plain-looking woman in a navy dress. The satin gown with the sweetheart neckline managed to disguise her rather inelegant profession. Helene knew this woman very well. She had done her fair bit of research on the detective who had been tracking Helene for almost a year now. Of course, Detective Laura Holland had never seen Helene. The detective's only means to recognize Helene was a poorly constructed composite sketch from a scattered dozen witnesses. The figure depicted in the sketch shared very little likeness with Helene. Helene had kept close tabs on the investigation since it was opened by the detective. They pieced together a great many thefts that Helene was responsible for, although it was nowhere near the actual number. But they had nothing. No concrete evidence, no leads, not even a real name for their suspect. Still, the detective's presence caught her off guard, which bothered Helene greatly. Helene scanned the list of all invited guests 4 times to ensure nobody would know her. She knew the detective was married to the newly elected district attorney. If she saw his name, then Helene would have had second thoughts about carrying out this job. Helene took a deep breath. She was too experienced to let this unexpected arrival distract her from her plan, even if it meant she had to make some last-minute adjustments. Helene kept her eye on the detective as the detective joined arms with her husband. As long as Helene knew where the detective was at all times, then she could carry on just as she had intended. In fact, the idea of pulling off a theft right under the curious nose of Detective Laura Holland was starting to excite Helen. The party progressed with little thrill. Laughter and loud conversations echoed off the walls that held some of the most expensive art in the city. Some of the paintings earned their value. Others were rather unremarkable, but had a value placed upon them from uncultured vultures who didn't know any better. Helene took special care to keep a healthy distance between herself and the piece she desired most. The contemporary sculpture, merely the size of a lemon, yet it still managed to be the most expensive piece in the building. The owner of the gallery also deemed that this party of the most respected in the city is the one and only time that the sculpture Tide Rising be displayed without its case. It is still sitting on a plate that will sound an alarm if it is removed, but for somebody like Helene, that is hardly a cause for concern. This is her best opportunity to get her hands on the incredibly detailed miniature seascape. It was a shame she could not admire it before it ended up in her palm, but the cameras were her key worry. While she did her best to avoid them from getting a clear angle, it was still in her best interest to not draw any connection to herself and the sculpture before it goes missing. Instead, she focused her gaze on an exquisite painting in the corner of the room, far from the groups of people marinating in their mundane conversations. Helene sipped her champagne as she took in every brushstroke and color dictated by the artist. "It's a shame this painting isn't given its due," a voice stated behind her. "It should be in the center of the room instead of shoved in the corner." Helene nodded before turning to face the other admirer. It took every ounce of control for Helene to maintain her neutral expression as she locked eyes with Detective Laura Holland. Helene pulled the corners of her mouth upwards. The detective did not show any indication that she believed the smile to be strained. "I couldn't agree more," Helene responded. "It evokes such strong emotions. I especially love the way the artist uses colors to tell the story as much as the picture." The detective thought on Helene's words. "I'm not an expert on art, but for some reason this piece caught my eye. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost as if this is a dissection of identity." "Well, you may not be an expert, but I wouldn't sell yourself short," Helene said. "That is exactly the message I got from the piece. It's almost as if the subject in the painting is caught between an embrace and a rejection of the self. It's stunning." There was a pause as they both took in the painting. Helene could not help but steal a glance of the detective out of the corner of her eye. It was almost refreshing to see how transfixed the detective became with one of Helene's favorite paintings in the room. "You have a good eye and great taste," Helene remarked. "Most people here wouldn't understand the magnificence of this painting, only what others told them of it." Detective Holland studied the painting before turning her gaze to Helene. "I don't think I know you." "Lisa Kemper." Helene held out her hand, taking special care to keep it from shaking. "Nice to meet you." "Laura Holland," the detective replied, reaching out her own hand. "It's nice to meet you too." They pulled their hands apart in unison. Helene took another sip of her champagne. "What is it that you do, Miss Kemper?" the detective inquired. "Please, call me Lisa. I suppose my vocation is to support the arts, although I am lucky enough to have the funds to allow me to pursue any of my passions." "I'm guessing old money then." Helene grinned, slightly taken aback with the detective's directness. It was almost impressive. Then Helene remembered that Laura was a cop. Directness came with the job, It was probably hard to turn off even on these occasions. Yes, Helene replied. Family money. I've never heard of the Kempers, the detective murmured. We pride ourselves on our discretion. The detective grabbed a flute of champagne off a passing tray. A moment of relief passed over Helene as she hoped that this was the first glass of many for the detective. Things would go much easier if she was slightly impaired. What is it you do, Miss Holland? It's Laura. Actually, it's Detective Laura Holland. She stated, my husband is the district attorney and I am just a lowly detective. I'm sensing that you are used to being looked down on at these events. Everyone prefers basking in your husband's glow. Laura turned to Helene. That's an interesting thing to say. I'm sorry if I offended you, Helene said, resolving to not become a memorable figure for the detective. No, you're not wrong. Helene cleared her throat. If it is any consolation, I admire detectives perhaps more than any lawyer. Lawyers have their tricks, but they are nothing without you. The basis of the legal system starts with the actual pursuit of the criminals. They get the easy part. They just have to talk to see if the system works for them or if it doesn't. End quote. Laura chuckled. A wholehearted burst of laughter that could in no way be described as dainty. It was quite infectious. Helene could not help but join in. She made note of all the heads turning in their direction, but she did not let it worry her. This is what happened at these holiday gatherings. People made connections and they laughed together. I think I'm starting to like you, Lisa, Laura said before taking a long drink of champagne. At the very least, you actually seem interested in what I have to say. Most assume that I am a complete idiot because I didn't go to Harvard or Princeton or Yale. Helene leaned in closer to Laura. This room is almost entirely composed of idiots. They just have daddy's money to buy their sophistication, which, unfortunately, is often mistaken for intelligence. You are quite perceptive, Laura admitted. I try to be. They turned their attention back to the painting in front of them. However, Helene did catch Laura's eyes shifting in her direction every few seconds. There's my beautiful wife, a man's voice called out. The district attorney approached and reached for Laura's hand. They shared a tasteful peck on the cheek. Lisa, this is my husband, Laura said. James, this is Lisa Kemper. Helene put her hand out first, which James promptly took. A strong handshake. Helene expected nothing less from the respected district attorney. The moment after the handshake, James ran his fingers through his dark hair. I haven't heard the name Kemper before. They don't like the spotlight, Laura offered on Helene's behalf. Helene smiled as her confirmation. Then I wish I met more of your kind, James responded. It seems everybody wants to be known in this room if only it ensures they get to know all the other presumably respectable people in the room. Helene and Laura took a simultaneous sip from their champagne flutes. Which of course, darling, is why I came to get you, James continued. We have a lot more hands to shake and people to chit-chat with. It is too tiring for me to do alone. Of course, dear, I'll be along in a minute. James retreats, making his way to a group of men in suits. Its members consisted of at least one CEO and 2 congressmen. I suppose this is where I leave you, Lisa, Laura murmured. Even though this short conversation may be the only interesting one I have this evening. A flutter of flattery struck Helene. She realized that in a different world she could see the two of them having more conversations. Maybe even one day a bond akin to friendship developing between them. I had a pleasant time making your acquaintance, Helene declared, surprised at the honesty of the statement. And Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Laura gave Helene a smile, a truly authentic smile. Helene identified it immediately as it was rare for her to encounter one, let alone share one herself, but she found her face doing just that. It was her natural response to the aura of calm that emitted from Laura. When she turned away, a part of Helene wanted to follow, if only to stay in her orbit. To linger on the edges of all her exchanges. Helene was overcome with how fascinated she had become in their short time together. Perhaps a large amount of that fascination came from the knowledge that Helene possessed and Laura did not. It was simply the thrill of conversing nonchalantly with the cop that was hunting her. That had to be the extent of the appeal. She had remained stagnant long enough. It was time for her to make another pass around the room. Helene glanced at her watch. It was already after 9. Hopefully, with the champagne flowing, most of the guests would be adequately distracted by now. As Helene walked slowly around the room, occasionally taking in the art, she could not help but notice a pair of eyes watching her. The detective, while nodding along to the remarks of the people surrounding her husband, kept her interest far from that interaction. Her focus instead remained with Helene. It made Helene uneasy and delighted. There was no evidence of suspicion, it was pure curiosity. Helene was pleased she could make such an impression. But Helene became aware that it was not her intention to make an impression. Her plan relied on her ability to blend in with the crowd. Someone next to Laura beckoned for her attention, pulling her back to the uninteresting world of the others. This was Helene's best chance. She made her way to the small sculpture, reaching inside her clutch bag for an object that could perhaps be called art to a certain viewer. It did not have the detail or value of Tide Rising, but Helene wagered she had at least an hour until the first person noticed that this may well be a forgery on the stand. It was all about making the switch swiftly and smoothly, both of which Helene excelled at as she had done similar jobs many times before. Yet this one was starting to feel different. Her excitement at making the switch was fading instead of growing. This was usually the best part of any job. The thrill of either getting away or getting caught. All the planning and preparation that comes down to a single moment, it was intoxicating. Helene stood by the sculpture, a sufficient crowd around her to hide her movement, yet her mind was on wanting to return to where Laura could keep watching her. This fascination was getting dangerous. A new kind of intoxication. Helene did not have many real moments of connection with people. Maybe her hesitation was her attempt to wonder if it was worth it to see where this particular connection could lead. The glass doors shut behind Helene as the cold air met her face with a bracing clarity. She waited until she was a block away before she dared to look into her purse. She took a few moments to stare at the beautiful masterpiece firmly in her possession. Helene was a talented forger, but she could never do the real thing justice. This artist was so certain in their identity and free from ambivalence that their art could never be faithfully reproduced by anybody else. Helene closed her clutch. She took a deep breath of relief that followed all of her successful heists. Although this sigh escaped with a certain dejection. In another life, Helene and Laura could have made wonderful friends. Helene continued her way forward in the chilly night. She did not want to linger on any alternative choices that she believed she could have made. This was her life. It was no use wondering if she could be any different. Story 7, Amsterdam. The streets of Amsterdam were slippery this morning. A combination of light rain and a bit of freezing. It was quiet outside. Most people were sleeping in on Boxing Day, or Second Christmas Day as they call it here. He couldn't remember the last white Christmas, but cold and rainy ones were all too common. He did remember his last Christmas homicide case, and the one before that. The hotel lobby was busy, with staff nervously pacing around and people being questioned by his colleagues. He took the stairs to room 327, where the bodies of the couple lay on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. There was a lot of blood, almost too much, but that was not what made him feel uneasy. The most disturbing part wasn't the brutality of the scene, it was the small girl, no older than 6. Crouched in the corner, staring straight ahead. She was holding a blood-stained light blue teddy bear, squeezing it tightly. She hadn't said a word since the housekeeper found her, nor had she moved. No one knew who they were, who she was. He crouched beside the girl, careful not to startle her. Her clothes were clean but wrinkled, as though she had spent the entire night sitting there. He spoke softly to her, his voice low and reassuring, but her eyes remained fixed on the floor, unblinking. He looked around the room. No luggage. He stood up and glanced toward the window, noticing it had been left slightly ajar. The woman had checked in with a name that did not turn up anything. The man and the child were not seen coming in, but apparently many people come and go in a place like this. The camera system had its issues, and the IT guy was off during the holidays. As Jacobson stood by the window, his mind raced through the possibilities. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, just two dead bodies, and a girl who didn't or couldn't speak. Everything was wrong, very wrong. As he was about to speak, the girl whispered, her voice barely audible, "They were not supposed to be here." The words sent a chill down his spine. He crouched down again, watching her, searching her face for more, but she remained silent, her eyes still distant, as if she hadn't spoken at all. Jacobson's heart raced. What the hell? He asked her what she meant, but this apparently was all she was willing, or able, to say. Trauma and shock were all too common, but this was something different. A draft brushed his neck, colder than it should have been. Something was wrong here, more than just the bodies on the bed. As he opened his mouth to press the girl further, the door creaked open, and Jacobson turned to see a young officer, her face pale as if she'd just seen a ghost. It was her first homicide. "Detective," she said, her voice barely steady. "We have someone on the phone. She says she's the mother of the man in the room." No one had been able to identify the victims. And now, out of nowhere, a call like this? "Put her on hold," Jacobson instructed, his voice steady but his pulse quickening. He glanced back at the girl. Her cryptic words they were not supposed to be here echoed in his mind. Jacobson headed toward the hallway where there was a phone on the wall, probably rarely used these days. He could hear the faint, steady breathing of the woman on the other end. "This is Detective Jacobson. You say you're the mother of the man in room 327? He asked. A pause followed, then a trembling voice answered, "Yes, my son. His name is Tomas. Please, I need to know what happened." Her words were shaky with an accent he could not quite pinpoint. "How did you know he was here?" There was another long silence, and Jacobson could almost hear her thinking. Finally, she whispered, "I've been looking for him. He shouldn't have been there. He sent me a message when I was asleep yesterday." A coldness crept over him as the pieces of the puzzle began to shift. "What do you mean he shouldn't have been there?" he pressed. The woman's voice grew quieter as she continued. "Thomas and his wife, they were running. For months now. He never told me the details, just that it was dangerous, and they couldn't stay in one place for long. And they could not return to Europe. They were always moving, mostly traveling separately. He said it was safer that way. I begged him to go to the police, but he refused. Said it was bigger than that, something I wouldn't understand." Her breath hitched as she tried to steady herself. "They had been hiding for so long, I thought." She paused, as though trying to find the right words. "I thought they were finally safe." Jacobson leaned against the wall, thinking about the woman's words. His gaze drifted back toward room 327, where the little girl still sat, silent and unmoving. Something didn't add up. "And your granddaughter?" Jacobson asked, his voice careful, testing the waters. "The little girl who was found with them?" A sharp intake of breath came through the phone. "Granddaughter?" the woman repeated, her tone edged with confusion. "What are you talking about?" Jackson felt the weight of her question settle in, the unease growing. "There's a girl, about 6 years old, found in the room with them. She hasn't spoken much, but she was there when the bodies were discovered." The silence on the line stretched too long, and Jacobson's grip tightened on the receiver. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Detective, that isn't their daughter, And whatever it is, it's not a child. That's when the screaming started. He sprinted back to the room, which was empty. A trail of blood led to the now wide open window. The light blue teddy bear perched on the window ledge, its button eyes fixed on Jacobson. It almost seemed to smile, as though it had watched everything unfold and knew exactly what came next. Story 9, Poems and Penitence. Juvie wasn't hell. It was bearable. Barely. Everyone, her mama and her sister and kids from school who'd never given a damn about her before had approached her with shining eyes and earnest voices, telling her to be careful, keep her head down, don't get on anyone's bad side like it was a state penitentiary or something and not Hoskins County Junior Jail. Junior Jail wasn't the real name. Duh. But juvenile was a juvenile word, and detention sounded too much like school. Like they were in timeout. It was timeout, all right. Timeout from her classes, which was okay the first couple days, until she started to miss them too. Timeout from home, her bed, her windowside succulents, and her stupid poetry. And timeout from her sister Marla, from her mama, like she hadn't endured enough of that already. State penitentiary, that was a good one. Did she feel penitent? Was she sorry? Alan figured she should. After all, she'd broken the law, and her civics teacher missed her. Rook always said the law was the foundation of all human rights, or some other nonsense. But wasn't the people's safety the most important law? She'd heard that somewhere too, or a thing like it. Anyway, it didn't matter what she thought because she was here, and like her mama said about stubborn things, she couldn't change it for all the wishing in the world. Had she bent the rules? Had she hurt people? Yes, she guessed so. But she was here, and Alin had weeks to learn what penitence felt like. 3 weeks until the trial. Man, if you don't get you fat butt out the way. Alan heard this so much, she didn't even notice that this time. It was directed at her. She wasn't fat would and never thought so. Everyone became a fat butt as soon as they were on the inside. In this side of juvie, she never saw the boys' side. Nuh-uh, no sir. Fat was the cruelest insult girls could think of, and they hurled it often. Funny, the girl saying it now had such a deep and slow voice, the words rolled off her lips like thick drops of honey. F.A. boo. Alan tried not to laugh, just kept moving down the lunch line for some cornbread, which was about the only thing worth eating today. The girl wrapped her hand around Alin's arm, making her tray jerk. The plastic spoon clattered to the floor. Alin turned back. Why'd you do that? The tall girl who Alan remembered was named Brianna, had 2 shoulder-length braids and the kind of jaw you want to punch. 'Cause you wasn't listening, she said in her drawn-out speak. I said, get you butt out the W. I'm in line. I'll get out of line when I'm done. She had never hit anyone, but as she looked at Brianna, she could imagine digging a good one into her. The sound her teeth would make clapping together would be mighty satisfying. You done now? Ain't, Alin countered, as the lunch lady piled on overcooked green beans. Faster than you could blink, Brianna tipped her tray over, spilling it onto the floor, over Alin's white shoes. Guess that's what happens to fat, slow butts. Alan looked around the cafeteria. None of the girls looked her way, and she knew the guards were far enough that they could pretend they didn't see anything either. Brianna had stepped around her and was getting her own tray filled, but she threw a look back as Alin knelt to pick up her tray, an evil grin. She imagined whacking Brianna in her right eye. In her mind, she leaned in, hawking a big loogie onto her food, but instead of these things, she felt her eyes welling up. I don't know why you did that. I was only getting my lunch. Brianna ignored her, but Alin kept at it. You think 'cause you're tall and mean, you get to go first in line? That don't make no sense. It ain't fair. You know that, right? Hello? It ain't what's fair. The other girl just gave Alin another look, less mocking and more pitying. You in here and you still waiting for things to be fair? Nah, get real. Alan made herself move. She still had to eat. I should have punched her right in her stupid face, Alin told herself sometime later, when she had space to think things over. She was always saying this, resolving to fight back next time. Only she never did. Maybe she didn't have the violence in her even here. It hadn't rubbed off. She'd always known she was different from other folk, even if she couldn't say how. But she still couldn't understand how people could be so mean, breaking the rules for no good reason. Juvie had a program called Hands That Hold. First, Alin thought it was one of those optional things, but later she realized it was required. She didn't want to go holding anyone's hand. Only that wasn't what it was about, not really. It was kind of like group therapy or support group, or one of those anonymous meetings her mama went to only for a few weeks when Alin was 10. They assigned you one of the time slots through the day, and she hadn't gone yet, but through the grapevine she'd gathered that everyone talked about what they did to get here. Only they didn't say crime. That word was basically illegal in the meetings. They liked the word choice. Everything was a negative choice or a positive one. Aylin didn't think life was so black and white, but she knew then to voice that opinion. She didn't want to talk about her choices with these people, but she knew she had to do something, so she'd started throwing together a little poem. Just like all her other ones, it had seemed better in her head than after she'd written it, but she would still rather this than spout answers out of nowhere. When Alan sat in one of the cushy blue couches, there were 6 of them, all arranged in a circle. Miss Pryor gave a small speech. Remember, you're all here because of a choice you made. Blaming someone else or feeling victimized is pointless and is only going to stop you from growing. It begins with being honest about that choice, examining it, learning from it. Then, once you leave, this place will be more than a blip on your radar. It'll be where you underwent tremendous change and growth. Aylin liked Miss Pryor fine, with her pearl earrings, short crochet curls, sleek blue and violet outfit, but she was talking some BS. In a cause and effect kind of way, Alan had made a choice, and the choice led her to juvie, but she didn't like all this about her taking on the blame. It didn't feel right. Alan was staring down at the tiled floor when she realized everyone had stopped talking. When she looked up, they were all staring at her. Miss Pryor had asked her something. Huh? What's the question? I said, what's your name? She said, in that gracious voice of hers, is it your first time with us? Like they were in a yoga class or something? Yeah. She cleared her throat. Yeah, Alan. Aylin, welcome. Everyone said hi, all quiet. Thanks. She wished she could go back to staring at the floor. Would you like to share with us, Alan? Number no thanks? Her poem wasn't done anyway. Are you sure? Just a little bit will do. Tell us about yourself. Alin told them about Harvard High, her friend Gary, who was as goofy as they come, her sister Marla, and how she loved Looney Tunes, and her own amateur poetry. Poetry, you said? Did you bring any with you? We would love to hear some. Maybe next time, Aylin muttered. She could just imagine everyone laughing. And after that, Miss Pryor left her alone. The best and worst part about juvie was Alan got her own room. Good, because at lights out, she could escape the other girls and not hear Fat Butt or any of the rest. Bad, because she got real lonely. At home, she shared a room with Marla, one bed on each wall. Her sister passed out early, but Aylin would wake up at least once a night. It had been nice to look over and see Marla's sleeping face, and it hurt to not see it here. There were visiting times, 1 hour each day, and 2 3-hour slots on the weekend. Alan's mama was busy working 2 jobs, so she didn't get to come much, but Alan tried to stay in touch with letters. Her first one was short, describing the place and telling her it wasn't too bad and not to worry, that she would be home soon. Her mama's reply was even shorter. Nothing, no response. Alin kept writing though, and her second one went into more detail, talking about Brianna and Hands That Hold. Then, on the second Saturday, Alan had visitors. In the recess yard, Alin was sitting on a bench by the half-court, working on her poem when a shadow fell over her. She looked up, blinking in the sun. "Delicate?" the guard said. "Alin, someone here to see you." Alan followed into the air conditioning and down the long hallway, turning toward the front and the visitors area. It wasn't like you see in jails. No dividing glass or phones, just tables and chairs and ugly lighting. But a dozen guards made sure no one got rowdy. Alan's mama and Marla were sitting there, but they stood when she walked in. Alan didn't know what to do. "Alan!" Marla rushed around the table and hugged her tight around the middle. She felt like crying, but she couldn't somehow. Her mama spoke up. "Hey there, Sugar Bean." Alan didn't know what a sugar bean was, but she'd always liked how it sounded coming from her mama's lips. "Hey, Mama." Her voice was quiet. Marla let go now, her face shining up at her big sister. "Miss you. When you coming back?" Alan ran a hand through Marla's long cornrows and tried to smile. "Soon, booger." Marla laughed and started picking a fake booger now to mess with her. Alan couldn't remember the last time her mama had stared so long. "Alan, she swallowed. "I'm sorry you in here, baby. I'm so sorry." "What you sorry for?" Alin said, sharper than she meant to. "Ain't your fault." Marla was going on and on about some new show she was watching, and Alan wanted to listen, but all she could do was lean in toward her mama's face and catch her quiet words. "I should have seen what was happening. Should have stopped you, but Mama, you couldn't have stopped it. You know that. It's me who did it. But if I just worked harder, tried more, Stop it." The force in her voice surprised her. Tears slipped down her mama's face, and she didn't bother to wipe them. Alan hated that it made her think of sweat, of hard work. "Baby, it's just seeing you in this get-up," she gestured at the light blue coverall all the juvies wore. "It's about more than I can take. It ain't right." "Number it ain't," said Alan, "but you can't change it, and neither can I." When her mama said nothing, Alan knelt down to Marla. "Now you take care of Mama while I'm here, and eat all your food, every bite. I'll be back for you can blink." When Alan went to Hands that hold 3 days later, a different group greeted her. Brianna was there. Someone named Darren finished telling them about tagging a bank downtown with high interest for crooks. And Miss Pryor turned to Alin. "So, Lynn, right? We would all love to hear from you. Did you say you had written something? Anything you'd like to share today?" Hell no, she wouldn't. But Alan took the folded sheet of paper from inside her coverall, the one she'd looked over 1,000,000 times last night, and cleared her throat. "We don't want to hear from no crybaby," shouted Brianna suddenly. Alan threw her a poisonous look, her face feeling like an allergic reaction. "Excuse me, Brianna," said Miss Pryor before anything could happen. "We don't speak to each other that way here. This is a place of respect. Everyone deserves to be heard, including Alan." Brianna scoffed, but sat back, her long legs spread wide like she was home on the couch, arms folded. Alin tried to ignore her, but the paper was shaking in her hands. "Wasn't sure what to say," she said softly, "so I wrote this poem. Might make sense to y'all. Or maybe not." She gave a half shrug. Alan had never been the biggest reader, but poetry she soaked up with ease. Rita Dove, Alice Walker, Angelou, and Langston Hughes, but also Sylvia Plath and some older ones. This was her clumsy attempt. She cleared her throat, moistening her lips. "Thou shalt not steal," they say. But sometimes rules get blurry. Hard to read, the letters hurry. The sound muffled. Someone speaking from the next room, or whispering them. They tumble in your brain and let go of each other. They become separate, don't make sense no more. Rules are here to protect us, ain't they? Well, protect who? Protect me? Protect you? Protect the little girl who's missing her food? The man on the corner who's missing a tooth? Nah, that ain't right. I said it ain't right. That if a mama gets a little more cash, the money from the food is gone just as fast. As you can blink, and all the wishing in the world can't bring it back. Sister longs for her favorite snacks. It's an attack against the spirit. All she wants is to eat, You can hear it in her stomach, rumbling in the night. She got food, but it's the kind no one likes. You lay awake, and the shadows of nighttime pass over you like secrets, and the rules don't feel like protection no more. They feel like chains. So you break them and you run to the store. You don't clean the place out. Just a snack or two, a loaf of bread, a gallon of tea, a few of sister's favorite things. You make a mistake, but it don't feel like one feels like caring for the one you love. Drawing from a well and giving her a drink. The rules don't protect me, and they don't protect you. When you break the chains, they slither back and wrap around you, draw you close into the darkness. Don't matter what you meant. Don't matter what you thought. All that matters is the rules, and they ain't going nowhere. Alan looked up. No one said a thing for a long time, not even Brianna. A week later, Alan went to her trial. An adjudication, they called it. There wasn't a jury or anything, but there was a lawyer with her, a white lady with sleek black hair. They named her crimes, and everyone gave statements. The room chilled her arms, and Lynn kept looking back at her mama and Marla sitting there, and they would smile and wave like she was on stage at school doing a play. Finally, it was her turn. She stood and looked at the judge, trying to block all the images from juvie, the ones of Brianna and everyone with their name calling, from her mind. A breath in, a breath out. I did commit a crime. I stole food from Henry's grocery, 2 blocks down from our apartment. It was late at night, and I did it. I've been thinking about if I would do it again, if I did the right thing. I never stole a thing before in my life, you know? Never. Never hit anyone, nothing. Mama had food stamps, but she got a promotion at one job. Only we didn't realize it would put her having just too much money. Too much for the government. So the stamps went away, and we still weren't rich. So it was back to rice and beans, pasta. No more steaks or nothing. Marla's little, she couldn't understand. Maybe I was imagining it, but she seemed sadder then. Hungrier every night. I couldn't stand it, so I went to Henry's and took some stuff. All these weeks, I've had people telling me that I couldn't do that, it wasn't right. Even had Miss Pryor saying it was a negative choice. But it didn't feel so bad, and it still don't. I just wanted what's best for Marla. I'm sorry to Mr. Henry if I caused him any trouble. He was always nice to my family, but I can't say I wouldn't do it again. I can't say I wish I never did it. I'd be a liar on top of being a thief. So I'm telling the truth now. I ain't gonna go out to a life of crime, not on purpose, but I'm being punished for wanting my sister to eat good, and that. Alin blinked hard. Her throat was tightening. That ain't fair. That's what I kept saying while I was in juvie. This ain't fair. This ain't fair. It ain't. But I have to live with it. I'm facing my choice, just like Miss Pryor taught. And I'm learning. What I learned is the world don't care if you're doing the right thing, or doing something for love, or helping someone. It only cares how you look. And if you're black and you're taking things, you're a thief. So I guess that's what I am. Is that fair? You tell me. Story 10! Therapy session! Things couldn't possibly get any worse. I'm not even sure how we got to this point, to be honest. I mean, we've never been the perfect couple by any standards, but then again, what couple is? Yes, we fought a lot. And sure, there's no denying that both of us had done things to piss the other off. It was a vicious cycle, but we always worked it out in the end. Even if it was usually for just a week or two before another issue arose. I never thought we'd end up here though, sitting on polar ends of the waiting room. There's such a wide gap between us that we may as well have been sitting in different rooms. Neither of us is speaking, barely making eye contact as we wait for the receptionist to call us back. The tension in the air speaks volumes. Everyone knows that marriage counseling is the last stop of a train wreck marriage before a divorce. Oh God, if we got a divorce, I would lose everything. And not to mention the humiliation, Craig would never let it go if Michelle and I got a divorce. I can't blame him though. She was his high school sweetheart, and I was his awkward geek of a little brother, but that was years ago, so he can't still be that upset, right? Mr. and Mrs. Crane? Oh yes, right here. I'm Theodore Crane, and that is my wife, Michelle. I reply, motioning toward her as I stand up to greet the man calling for us. He's a man of average height, with caramel-toned skin, a balding head of straight black hair, dark, beady eyes, and a warm, yet seemingly forced smile. He's dressed in a black suit, accented by a starched white dress shirt, and a golden Rolex on his left wrist. Nothing was out of place, not even a speck of dust adorned the thick frame of his glasses. Hello, I'm Dr. Bell. I believe we spoke over the phone last Friday. I will be working with you and your wife, he said, shaking the hand I had been holding out for him. Oh yes, Dr. Bell, it is so good to meet you. I have to tell you, I've always been a bit skeptical when it comes to therapy, but my wife thought it would be for the best, and whatever the wife wants, she gets, huh? I say, shaking his hand a little too vigorously. Come on, Ted. The man doesn't want to hear any of your pathetic attempts at comedy. We only get an hour with him today, and I don't want you wasting it on anything unimportant. Actually, why don't you just let me do the talking? Hi, Michelle Crane. It's a pleasure to meet you, Michelle says, standing up and shaking the doctor's hand, all while smiling and batting her eyelashes as if she hadn't just scolded me like a child. Mrs. Crane, I see that we have a lot of work ahead of us, so let's get started. Please follow me. Bang. Click. Did he just lock the... this is your fault, right? He probably got sick of the bickering, once again your fault, and locked us in here for it. I am so sick of... Attempting to drown out the horrid noise I have come to know as my wife's voice, I glance around the room we found ourselves in. It's smaller than average, pristine as if no one had entered before us, resembling one of those rooms that they put mentally disturbed people in. Yet, instead of padded white flooring and walls, it had these slightly glossy sunshine yellow ones. In the center of the room stands a shiny stainless steel table with... Wait, are those guns? I asked, not meaning to speak out loud. I have locked you in this room to... sounded throughout the room through an unseen speaker system. Bell, is that you? I swear to God I will sue you for everything you... Ted, let me finish. Now, as I was saying, I have locked you in the room to work out your marital issues. Throughout our sessions over the last year, I have tried many interventions. However, it seems that traditional counseling methods have had no impact on your marriage. My last attempt at fixing you is this. You must either find a way to resolve your issues, or if they are too extreme to resolve, then one of you must shoot the other. No exceptions. I will handle all of the complications, and no charges will be pressed, if it comes to that, of course. Why the hell would I ever shoot my wife? I yell as I hear Michelle scoff behind me. Ted, both Michelle and you have suggested both hypothetical and serious desires to harm or even kill one another. Actions speak louder than words. So let's see if you'll act upon them. Oh, come on, Teddy. We all know that you don't even have the balls to shoot pool, let alone me. The words slip out of her mouth like venom as her pale manicured hand grazes the table's smooth edge. She's not wearing her wedding ring, my mother's ring. She hasn't since she suggested we see Belle. Her blood-red lips turn upward into a relaxed, yet smug grin with a hint of arrogance sparkling in her eyes. Looking at me suggestively, she grips one of the guns the way a falcon grips its prey. How? Vintage, she purred, staring down at the weapon as she spins the cylinder. If only we had sought out marriage counseling sooner. I slink against the cold plastic wall, slowly attempting to find somewhere out of her range of fire, but of course, no such place exists. I feel the anger boiling inside me as I take note of my situation. I'm trapped in a room with a vile woman, a woman that I had once loved more than anything, who had latched her greedy claws onto me the minute she learned that I, in her often stated opinion, was wealthy enough for her to overlook my bad genes. This same mistake of conception, who also had a lovely habit of using fists and other objects in place of words to express herself, has now obtained a loaded weapon and by now has probably thought of at least 20 good, yet delusional, reasons to use it on me. Pushing these thoughts out of my head, I begin to walk towards her. You're right. You've always been right, Chell. That man you married 6 years ago, Ted, he is a terrible husband. He's passive, needy, jealous, and all those other things that you've complained, Humph mentioned in our therapy sessions. You deserve so much better. I see that now. Taking her hands into mine, I removed the gun and looked at her, attempting to plead solely through my gaze. Her bottom lip began to quiver as if her look of enraged seduction was a dam on the verge of breaking. But I am no longer that man. I am Theodore, a whole new being of your creation, from years of taunting and abuse, and you have no idea of what I'm capable of. I say as my expression shifted from one of pleading into one of pure, passionate hatred. She reached for the guns, but my reflexes were faster, knocking the closer one onto the floor with my elbow as I grabbed the other. She fell to her knees with a defeated thump and proceeded to beg me as she backed against the door. Ted, sweetheart. Theodore, please, she cried. There's another way, darling. We can work this out, I'm sorry. Her speech was as broken as the beautiful marriage we once had. Tears streamed down her makeup-smudged face. She was a Picasso, but this work of art was all mine. Cocking the hammer, I aimed it towards her forehead. There's no use, Michelle. I am no longer passive, and I am done being your puppet. Then I pulled the trigger 3 times. A pathetic sigh of relief exited her trembling lips as the mangled brass doorknob landed with a clang, allowing the door to creak open slightly. I dropped the gun as I approached it, smirking as my closing in caused Michelle to flinch. Standing in the doorway, I looked down at the sad excuse of a woman who was my wife. The divorce papers will arrive at your office at some point next week. Sign them. And with that, I was free. Story 11. The Time Capsule. Valerie couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her school was going to bury a time capsule. They were allowing seniors to put anything they wanted into the time capsule. It would be opened at their 10-year high school reunion. This was perfect. She could solve all of her problems with the use of the time capsule. They were planning on burying the time capsule during senior prom. They were going to announce the king and queen. Then they would go out to the pre-dug hole, and beginning with the king and queen, they would all put in the things that they wanted to place. When that was done, the king and queen would throw on the first 2 shovels full of dirt. Each student would throw one on, and the principal would finish it off. Valerie couldn't wait. She knew she was going to be prom queen, and she already knew what she wanted to place inside the time capsule. Boy, would the proverbial shit hit the proverbial fan at that reunion. Prom was 2 months away. Valerie plotted and planned to make certain that she had everything she needed to properly preserve what she was placing into the time capsule. She wanted everything to be picture perfect. No one knew Valerie's deepest, darkest secret. Not her parents, not her siblings, not her best friend, not even her boyfriend. Even the person that the secret was about was obliviously unaware. A week before the prom, Valerie took all of the money she had saved up and bought a vial that would preserve frozen products indefinitely. It cost her well over $200, but it was totally and completely worth it to her. She snuck it into the house while her parents were at work. She had already concocted her plan. She would be leaving to go to college, her parents and everyone else thought, the day after graduation. In reality, she was going to a youth center that focused on young girls away from home and in trouble. When the night of the prom arrived, Valerie looked radiant. Her mother, unknowingly, even said that she had a glow. They thought it was the excitement of the night, and honestly, some of it was. It really was. Valerie and her boyfriend arrived at the prom. They were greeted with squeals of delight and high fives. Tonight was the night they all planned to go all the way. This wasn't a problem for Valerie. She had gone that route several times prior to tonight. She and her boyfriend danced every dance. They drank lots of punch, none spiked, not for Valerie. Her excuse was that she wanted to keep her wits about her and remember every moment of this extremely special night. Her boyfriend was cool with that, but he drank the spiked punch mainly because he was nervous as hell. They all voted, knowing that Valerie and her boyfriend would win, but they did it anyway. Then away went the principal and his committee to count up the ballots. Now Valerie was beginning to feel nervous and queasy. Too much spinning around the dance floor, it seemed. She decided to take a seat, and her boyfriend went off to dance with someone else. She didn't feel jealous. Deep down, she knew that she had absolutely no right to. Finally, the principal and his committee returned with the results. To no one's surprise, Valerie and her boyfriend won. Valerie grabbed her large bag that she had brought with her to the prom and got ready to head outside to the time capsule. Just as the moment arrived, her boyfriend decided that their group was ready to leave. He and his friends saw no point in the time capsule. They thought it was stupid. Valerie immediately balked at the idea of leaving. She had to be there to put her items in the time capsule. She just had to be. Her boyfriend told her that he and his friends would be in the parking lot. That was fine with her. She didn't care as long as she got to that damn time capsule. He went his way to drink with his friends. She went her way to place her items in the time capsule. When it was time, she placed the preservative canister and a large manila envelope into the time capsule. She waited while everyone else that wanted to place their items inside. She threw the first shovel full of dirt, and then she and her friends left to meet the guys in the parking lot. Her boyfriend and his friends had been drinking the entire hour that it took to bury the time capsule. They were way too far gone to drive, but they wouldn't admit it, and the girls didn't want to ruin the evening, so they didn't push the issue. Valerie's girlfriends took a few drinks also and began to feel much better about the boys driving. Valerie, who was remaining sober, offered to drive, but the boys wouldn't hear of it. Her mind and soul told her not to ride with them, but her heart told her to go. Unfortunately, she listened to her heart. On Monday, there was a huge memorial set up in front of the school to honor the 6 seniors that had been killed in the automobile accident after the prom. Lots of cards and flowers were placed there. The school year ended and life went on. 10 years later, at the high school reunion, there was again a memorial set up for the seniors that had died. It was to have been Valerie and her boyfriend that dug up the first 2 shovels of dirt to begin the unburying of the time capsule. Since they were unable to be there, it went in alphabetical order. Once the time capsule was exposed, the principal, and he was still the principal, plucked it from the ground and brushed off the dirt. He brought it inside, where everyone gathered around to see what had been placed inside. No one was as shocked as the principal when they opened the container and envelope that Valerie had left inside. The preservative container held a sperm sample. The envelope held much more. It held the ultrasound showing that she was pregnant and the DNA test results that showed it belonged to the same person that the sperm sample belonged to, the principal. Story 12. Lost. He woke up on a park bench, totally in a daze, hair disheveled, tie askew. Tie? He never wears a tie, and he always takes utmost care of his person. High maintenance guy. To the hairdresser every week, as his boyfriend would testify. He could not comprehend the headache or what he was doing on that bench, considering that he did not drink nor did he touch drugs. Or maybe there was this meeting at Margot's mansion, a big affair, lots of top-notch lawyers and business people. He could not go home the way he was. His boyfriend's soon-to-be husband would not understand. Of course, he'd have to call, make an excuse, say that he'd overslept at the mansion and would soon be home. Problem was, he did not have a clue as to where home was. He felt in his pocket, could not find his top-of-the-line G-14 model phone. Wondered if maybe he'd left it there. He managed to get on his feet and straightened himself out, looked around and tried to orient himself. The craziest thing occurred to him. While there was some sort of fancy coffee shop across the street, he only remembered the place as being occupied by a maker of jetpacks. where he purchased the latest for his wild weekend crossings such as the Thames. His lavish lifestyle permitted such, and extreme skydiving from stratosphere like height and pressure suits. He'd flown there barely a week ago on the Jetstar special, barely $50,000 first-class return. As he bent down to tie his shoe, he noticed the blood at the cuff of his pants. Shocked something was very wrong. Where did that come from? The mansion again? He would have to get back to Margot's place. Or maybe first there would be some sort of indication of wrongdoing on the electronic board. Normally one at every intersection. Something else wrong. No electronic board to be seen. What was going on? He thought he was going mad. He decided to get a cab. None in sight. Across to the coffee place then. Maybe he could find a G-phone. What will it be? Asked the young man kindly. Excuse me, how long has this shop been around? I remember Jetpack Joe being here. Jetpack Joe? Never heard. We've been on this corner for 12 years. Peter was totally stunned. This was not possible. He felt like he was in the Twilight Zone. Excuse me, another question, please. You've heard of Margot's mansion, that sort of big castle on the hill? This time it was the barista who looked at him oddly. There is an old mansion on the hill. Never hear of it called by such a name. Been abandoned for ages. There was a murder there decades ago, so nobody wants to buy the place. Some people think it's even haunted, so you can imagine. Murder? What sort of murder? I mean, there are so many strange things like the Pollock murder of 2045. This time, the barista looked at him as if he had misunderstood. You mean 2005, don't you? Peter made as if he'd stated wrong, his head elsewhere. But he did not want to appear crazy and left it at that. He asked if he could use a phone to call a cab. Done. He was shocked to see one of these petrol-guzzling thing pull up. Almost choked the air out of his lungs. He asked to be driven to the mansion. The driver politely refused, saying that he would drive him to within a block of the place and no more. You mean because of this murder of way back when? Yeah, you ain't from around here, are you? Peter figured it was best to agree. Just visiting, he said. Tell me about this murder. Oh, a totally dreadful thing, you know. Family kindly invites a stranger for a night and he kills them all. Father, mother, 2 beautiful girls and a lad, knife them all to death. He could not believe this. Still, he asked to be brought to the corner suggested, paid the fare with some old pieces he found in his pocket, and walked to the mansion. Total disbelief. The sumptuous mansion of the night before was a ruin. But all of a sudden he had a flashback. The night before, the argument between the cross-dresser, a gorgeous Marilyn of yore, and a fellow who she found too aggressive, his hands all over, a glass being cut, himself interfering and the aggressor falling to the floor, blood spewing out of his head and him ending with blood on his trousers. He was musing thus as a police car slowed down and stopped by his side. Problem, mister? Yes, officer. There was a crime here last night. Last night? No action of any kind since 12005. Unless maybe some squatters who would have dared step in, but I doubt that. Scary as hell in there, even in daytime. We're sure you're okay? Oh, I look at you. I notice these red stains on your pants. You're hurt? Oh no. Sloppy eater. Spaghetti sauce, you know, he replied, trying to make a joke out of this. He did not want to make things worse by saying that yesterday was 2045 for him and immediately be placed in a straitjacket. This was just too insane. He explained to the cop that he was a journalist and wanted to have just a quick look around the place. A follow-up story on the brutal murders. Understood. Just be careful, lots of pitfalls around that places. He walked to the front of the mansion, peered inside, all in ruins of course, but still beautiful round staircase, a library in the corner, still full of dust-covered books, lovely chandelier. A grand piano, amazingly like the one he'd seen the night before. music from Machner, a brilliant composer on the rise, and that flashback of the body hitting the piano before hitting the ground. The police was called, they were all questioned and released, but he did not go very far as he wished to console the beautiful, seedy Marilyn, so they found their way upstairs and, oh yes, now he remembered the lovely heat, the hugs and the caresses, her lips on his manhood, the drinks, and perhaps for some reason someone had spiked it. He had no clue in regard to how he'd left the place and found himself on that bench. But of one thing he was certain, he had cheated on his boyfriend for the first time, and that is most likely why he was in no rush to get back home. Story 14, The One Who Got Away. I used to help my father clean the shed once a week to earn an allowance of $10. It wasn't much, but I was grateful for any small amount of money to put towards a new video game or mechanic airplane parts. At least Dad continued my allowance, and it gave me something to do. Before my days in the shed, I helped Mom at the flower shop and did my best to educate customers on the best flowers according to the occasion. Flowers, as it turns out, are my favorite pastime. Unfortunately, that all stopped when I was 13 and Mom packed her bags and left in the middle of the night. No goodbye, no note, just there 1 minute, gone the next. I missed Mom a lot the weeks following, but I soon decided that anyone who left without an explanation or goodbye to their own child didn't deserve any tears. I decided I'd miss her money more, my allowance, because it hurt less than remembering her warm hugs, forehead kisses, and twinkling eyes that looked at me like I could accomplish anything. I wasn't always close to Dad, but we eventually learned to laugh at the same things and drink our coffee the same way, almost black, a splash of cream. He had a throaty laugh that was sometimes too loud, but we both had green eyes and a strong build. It took a few months after Mom left for us to talk because he felt quieter than before and sometimes forgot I was there, but that wasn't much different from when Mom was around. He'd always been stuck at work late before, and we never had much time to talk anyways. The day Dad and I finally bonded remains fresh in my mind. I'll never forget it because that was the moment that launched a series of wonderfully exciting events my life previously had been lacking. "Can I help in the shed?" I asked Dad one day after school, still wearing my shoes, backpack, and black jacket soaked from rain. I leaned over the counter and glanced into the living room where he sat in his leather chair and sipped his coffee, reading the newspaper. He was so old-fashioned, he never even bought a phone. A number? He fixed his eyes on the bottom left corner of the paper, the crime section, I called it. Why not? Why should you? His green eyes flicked up to me over his rectangular glasses. Because, well, Mom left, Max. Well, exactly. Mom gave me an allowance. Now, I can't work till I'm 18, and I need money. It doesn't have to be much, just enough so I can save up. You're 16, son. You can't really need much, can you? I needed enough. But if I wanted him to say yes, I had to settle for less. I just need 15 a day? A week? Ugh. Okay, 10. Dad pursed his lips and looked out our kitchen window at his shed, his happy place. The sky looked purplish gray, but it finally stopped raining. I saw the wheels turning as he twisted his lips around. He worked morning to night 6 days a week, and when he was home, he spent all his time cutting wood and repairing things in the shed. 10 is all I can give you, Max, he said, eyes flicking back to me. Once a week. I ain't rich like your mom. I hoped he'd be more generous, but I wouldn't complain. Instead, I grinned and fist-pumped the air, shouting, yes, because that money changed everything. Mom paid way more than Dad, sometimes up to $50 an hour, and when she was still around, my immature 13-year-old self went and blew the money on hot Cheetos, silly string, and sometimes balloons. No reason. But since I turned 16, I realized I liked aerospace engineering, which meant college, and my grades certainly weren't getting me there. But the real reason I needed money was a girl I liked. The first girl ever. Valeria Asensio, the one who got away. Valeria reminded me of strawberry waffles on Saturday morning. She smelled sweet, her plump lips were always tinted crimson, and she often knotted her wavy red hair in a bun straight on top of her head, like a strawberry on top, or cherry. But she had curves too, which is why strawberries made more sense. We had classes together since freshman year, but I noticed her my junior year in AP English since she always dominated Socratic seminars and used words like ensconce or dissipate, which were words I knew and liked but never used because Jerome and Carlos would give me crap about it if I did. But that Friday at the end of class, while we packed up our books, her blue eyes met mine, those shiny lips smiled, and I knew I had to make her fall for me. To do that, I had to take her out. And to take her out, I needed money. "We'll start next week," Dad assured, leaning back in his chair and adjusting his newspaper. "You can help me organize, clean up. Not much to do anyway." That was the second most important moment, helping Dad in his happy place. That's how we bonded. Once again, I had a parent who cared for me, and Dad I knew wouldn't walk out like Mom. The following week, we stood in the doorway of the shed as Dad pointed. Lawnmower could be emptied, tools could be cleaned, maybe use that wood over there and start building us some coffee tables. "I might need a raise if I'm building coffee tables," I joked, gently punching Dad's arm. He didn't laugh, but he did look over at me and half grinned before throwing an arm around my shoulders as we both looked on. And that's how it started. Every Sunday, I helped Dad organize and clean. It was his only day off, and he refused to let me work there when he wasn't around because there was one key and I might lose it somewhere. But I earned $10 a week, and on my 5th week, he gave me $25 because I spent extra time cleaning the yard tools. "You know, you take more after me than I thought." Dad leaned up against a table I worked on and watched as I cleaned the wrenches, tire iron, and gardening tools with a green, almost brown, now rag. "Your mother wanted you to pick flowers with her, but I'd say you're better at the tough work. See them blisters? You've been lifting those heavy shovels and digging some pretty spaces for the watering system. I've been doing it for years on my own." He held out a calloused hand, smudged with dirt and padded with scars. I'm not so sure I was cut out for the tough work, though. I accidentally cut the palm of my hand the week before while sawing a block of wood, and honestly, I thought my life was over. "Mom's missing out," I said, wiping the last wrench and setting it in the toolbox with the others. "We're better off without her." "You can say that again." Dad acted like he didn't miss Mom, but I knew he did. He stiffened whenever I mentioned her. I noticed pictures of our family tacked on the walls above our workstation in the shed, along with love letters she wrote him and jewelry she left behind. He stared out the window a lot, though our only view through the window were trees and his shed. He studied the newspaper like it might one day tell him where she went, or that maybe her new spotlight would find her on Broadway again, because maybe she went back to New York, where she first started out at only 17 and was making it even bigger now. Meanwhile, I'd been working up the courage to ask Valeria out. The day after I first asked Dad if I could help him, I sat next to Valeria in AP English. I said, "Hey," she said, "Hi," and we learned about AP things together. We sat next to each other every day for a month. Eventually, we'd work together on upcoming papers, edit each other's papers, grade each other. She practically tore my words apart, but it was fine. Until one day, she wrote on my paper during class, "When can we hang out?" Heck, yeah, it was happening. So on week 6, I asked Valeria Asensio out on a date to the carnival. We went on Saturday, and it was the best night of my life. In short, we laughed, spun on teacups, screamed on roller coasters, ate pink cotton candy, envelopes, and funnel cakes, and gold-coated ice cream. And I didn't win her a stuffed animal because I sucked at throwing, but I did buy her a light-up necklace. I mean, we were falling in love. And at the end of the night, she kissed me. The next day, as I helped Dad unload bricks for the well we were building, he studied me carefully, longer than usual. I pulled a brick from a bag, set it on the grass, another brick from, "You all right, Max? You're a bit quiet today." Dad straightened and put his hands on his thighs. "School going okay?" "What? Oh yeah, it's, well, pretty great." Valeria actually distracted me, so my grade in English went from an A to a B1, but maybe she could help me bring it up. And, well, can I ask you something? Dad stiffened, wiped sweat from his brow. "I know it's a touchy subject, but how'd you and Mom get together? Was there a process? How'd you know you wanted to marry her?" "Oh," he laughed suddenly, though it sounded more like an exhale. I think it was her smile, but she wasn't the one, Max. She left." "True. Maybe I was wrong for asking. Yeah, never mind." "So there's a girl, eh?" He nudged me then. "What's her name?" I didn't want to let Dad in on my love life, but I needed a family member to talk to about it. So I smiled and said, "Valeria. She wants me to call her Val. She's beautiful, Dad." "Why?" "Why? I mean, her mind is beautiful. And her blue eyes, that hair. She likes video games too." "Is she rich?" "What?" "I mean, can she help support you?" "I guess. I don't know." "Is that why you're working now? It's about a girl?" "No. I mean, was that a bad thing?" Was all he said. But then he loosened up and said, "You should bring her over sometime. If anyone wants to date my son, they gotta go through me." I laughed and said, of course, though I also decided I'd wait a while before ever introducing her to Dad. I understood why my friends never brought their chicks to meet their parents. They scared them away. Dad asked about Val every Sunday after, but I kept saying she works, because that seemed to be an excuse that appeased him. Val did work at a cafe, but I'd let her be the one to share. We started dating a month later, and 1 month turned into a year. She helped me bring my AP grades up and gave me the most valuable writing feedback ever, saying I was a talented writer. But I never saw my mistakes until I wrote the last sentence. Sweet, huh? We talked about attending college together and moving out of state, and I finally decided to introduce her to Dad. Of all the things that happened that year, this was the worst. I brought Val over Sunday evening. Val overdid herself. She wore a beautiful white and pink sundress, tan boots, gold earrings and bracelets, and left her hair down. God, I love that girl. I was certain I'd marry her after high school. After school, I brought her over and led her into the dining room where Dad sat in his chair reading the paper, and when he saw us enter the room, he grinned and stood quickly. "Hey, it's you, Max's girlfriend, right?" "Yes," she said nervously, laughing and blushing. "Valeria, nice to meet you." "Max's dad," he said and shook her hand. He didn't give his name, which seemed odd, but I was too nervous. It wasn't bad. This moment, I also replay in my head often, because I can't figure out what went wrong. I made them both coffee. Dad and Val laughed. She told him about our AP classes and working in the cafe. He didn't ask any embarrassing parent questions, and they spent an hour highly engrossed in a conversation about worms, compost, and gardening. I mean, I guess that was strange, considering Dad never cared about it when Mom brought it up. They got along so well, my nerves calmed, and I decided it was time for a bathroom break. It was quick, only 5 minutes. I did fix my hair, but I still thought it wasn't that long. But it was long enough, because when I came out, Val wasn't smiling anymore. "I should probably get going," she said, setting her cup on the coffee table. "I'm so glad I finally got to meet you, sir." We'll be in touch again." She looked up at me and smiled, but those blue eyes seemed afraid. Of me? I drove Val home that night and she was quiet. What's worse, it didn't end that night. She concentrated harder in AP. When I'd tap her, she'd shush me and say, "Let's focus." Her texts became short until I only heard from her when I texted about an upcoming test we could study for. She started bailing on dates, declining my calls, and a month later she dumped me. We didn't go to college together. We didn't get back together. When we graduated, she left to some college she decided on last minute, and then she was gone. That was the last time I heard from Valeria Asensio, my first love, the one who got away. That was 10 years ago. I'm 27 now, sitting at a cafe, writing this. And let me rephrase. That was the last time I heard from Val until today. "Max, is that you?" she said, setting my latte down as I Googled, "How much does a funeral cost?" These days, I make six figures thanks to my aerospace degree, but I never quite forgot how broke I used to be. I looked up and recognized Val by her diamond eyes and messy bun. So of course I shouted, "Val," and hugged her, and she actually hugged me back, but when she pulled away and looked at my computer screen, she stiffened. "Got a call last night," I said. "Dad, yeah, heart attack, so sudden." But she seemed uncertain, and then I asked her, "Why did you break up with me?" It wasn't the right thing to ask. I sounded insensitive, but over the past few years, I started piecing things together. I replayed my most important moments, my favorite memories, often in my mind, and over time, I started to make connections. Things didn't quite add up, but they also sorta did. And being at the cafe today wasn't a coincidence at all. After I got the phone call from the hospital last night, I knew I needed to see Val. Because she withheld a conclusion I didn't quite want to believe, but deep down knew all along. I Googled her all night until I found her social media page, found where she worked, and I flew out to see her. And now she says, "You never helped him, did you?" "No, Val, I did not." Just before I started writing this, but after Val asked her question, she explained that she broke up with me because Dad started talking about Mom that night. And he slipped. He said, "I'm glad Max has you. Haven't seen that boy so happy since his mom was alive." Val said what I would have. I thought she left. Val said, "You stopped, but then you smiled, and I don't know what you were thinking, Dad, but you must have assumed I was so much like you, I'd help you take Valeria next. You asked her if she'd ever kill for money, and when she didn't reply, you told her she didn't need to be worried. She wasn't rich enough for us, anyway." Now, Val says, "Your dad said you helped him kill your mom when you were 13, Max. That you helped bury her under the shed and took all her money. You decorated the shed with pictures and jewelry because it was a shrine. You both wanted her inheritance." What the hell am I supposed to think, Dad? I graduated, never earned enough scholarships, paid for college out of pocket, moved to another state, and you had all this money hidden for when I moved away. My biggest question is, why didn't you take me too? If this is true, I'm glad Val's the one who got away because it looks like Mom didn't. And am I supposed to even believe that? I'm picking out a casket for you, Dad, but maybe I need to find an empty one for Mom instead. Val told me to write this all down because I never noticed the mistakes until the last sentence. So now, with her next to me at the cafe, I'll reread this letter with fresh eyes. I'll pay attention to my favorite moments with you in the shed, with you reading the newspaper, with us digging holes and admiring the inside of the shed. But what good will it do now? You're dead and I have your inheritance now. Story 16, Bloody Future, Bloody Halls. My eyes examine the school. It is marble, cold and unforgiving. There is a scream. I felt myself run toward it and jerk back into class. I rarely remember the past as easily as I remember the future. The future is easy. The past is hard. I focus and try to pick through my future memories. I see the birth of a little girl. I smile. That'll be soon. I find the time I was in again and look around. Detaching myself from the body, I gaze over the school and see blood. On an astral level that overpowers everything else. I pull back from the future and pant. Is everything all right, Miss Jessel? Yes. Very well. Now, as I was saying, next school year, you will go to Margine High. Remember, this summer may very well be the last time you have a summer before college, unless you get held back. I look forward briefly to who will be held back. The smart girl? I raise my eyebrows but pull back. The bell will ring, I pull myself back and rock forward, jumping just when the bell rang. I run home as fast as I can, my feet carrying me forward. I don't pay attention to the path. I find myself in the park, and I sit there, my feet carrying me toward the bench. I throw myself forward to the bloody memory. Margine High, says the sign, my future school. As our current high school is being closed, we will move to Margine, but now I'm not sure I want to. My breath is shaky, and I'm struggling to breathe. Spit is pooling faster, and I put my head in my hands. The school has blood on its hands. Figuratively, obviously, but blood nonetheless. I get up and let my mind travel to better memories. But beyond the scream, I barely find anything. I see a woman screaming and holding a body. I shake and pull into what I call the Hall of Future Memories, where all my memories of the future are. I find the birth. I see the lifelessness on her for the first time. I can't handle death right now, and gag, slinking away from the memories. What goes wrong in that school? My feet can't support me, and I pull out my phone. Who should I call? Mom, I think. I won't look into the future for now. I call her and ask her to come to pick me up. I get a flash forward. Mom gives me a cup of coffee. I fall to the ground, lifeless. I see Dad burning my body, the screams. All of my past lead to death, I think irritably. My hands knit through my hair and run off. I look forward, the police. I run off and walk in. The receptionist listens to my prediction. People like me aren't unheard of, but we're definitely rare. I jump forward a moment and tell her sharply that I am not a faker and not to tell anyone where I am. She nods and walks away. I pull myself into a ball. I hear the door open, and I see my mother come in. I can't even see why she's here. Or can I? I throw myself forward. Officer, how may I help you, ma'am? Someone has kidnapped my daughter. I pull out of the memory and give a sharp laugh. Yeah, right. She turns to me. Darling. She hugs me. I briefly think about how lucky I am that I never told Mom or Dad I can remember the future. I take the coffee from her hand and look forward. Death if I drink it. A knife to the back if I don't. I pause and scream. The officer comes back in. She sees the woman I described to kill me and me holding a coffee cup. I look and see my father slinking outside. She grabs the cup of coffee and snaps my mom's wrist. She takes me to the back room. She holds the coffee and pours it as a poison tester and it flashes green. Any other memories? My high school. Blood. What school? Margine High. The officer whose name tag I can now read and tell her name is Stephanie sucks in a breath. We've had our suspicions about Margine for a while. Students with less than a 3.5 GPA disappearing. We'll track it down. I nod unceremoniously and pause. Why did they want to kill me? Maybe look into the past, said Stefan softly. I shake my head. It hurts. Try. I sigh and go into the memories, but as my mind spirals forward, I spiral back. I find myself stopped at a memory from about when I was 2 or 3. I am sitting in my crib. Mother. That's not my mother. But my little self calls her Mama. Little me holds up her hands. As I am picked up, little me slides a knife out of nowhere, and I see cuts over my little body. Abuse, maybe. I slide out the knife and stab the adult in the back, falling to the ground. Little me turns into a demon. The demon I used to see everywhere. He waits until the father comes in and easily stabs him. He picks up the real little me and puts me on the ground. The blood looks like fun to little me. I splash in it and invite the demon to play. He shakes his head and I see him drop the knife and vanish. I pull out of the memory and got forward. Not a lot, but still in the past. Little me is in a courtroom. The judge declares me a murderer to be raised by my aunt and uncle. I slide out of the memory and look at Stephanie. A demon killed my actual parents, and they thought it was me. They wanted me dead because they think I killed their siblings. The people I thought were my parents were my aunt and uncle on my mom's side. Stephanie nods. I suddenly feel a pull at the back of my head. I awake happily but suddenly fall back. As I realize that was the future, I see my guardian demon standing over me. "They can never hurt you again, little one," he says, picking me up and taking my place. I can do nothing but watch as he murders my parents and ends up pinning the blame on me. Story 17, Morgue Room B. My mother was obsessed with J.D. Salinger. If you have to know, she was a bit off. She swore from the moment I was born that I embodied the spirit of his writing. In particular, she always read me A Perfect Day for Banana Fish. Every night after bath, she would squeeze me with my towel and tell me to meet her in bed after I brushed my teeth. At the age of 7, I could recite direct dialogue from a short story about a deranged man who kills himself next to his wife. To say death was romanticized from a young age for me would be a complete understatement. I hadn't really decided why I was there that day, or if I thought she could actually help. Maybe I could start by talking about my mother, or my life, or how every day at 3 o'clock it feels like I can't breathe. It truly took me by surprise when it happened. I remember looking around and seeing that no one was there but me and her. We had never been alone before, so I just did it. I leaned down and said, "I'm sorry, what do you need to know?" Of course, there was no answer. I knew she wasn't going to answer, but I couldn't resist. "Don't worry, we can try again later." Haha, that was funny. Well, maybe it wasn't funny, but it was at least ironic, if you were into that sort of thing. I heard the door open behind me, and I grabbed my notebook. The director of the coroner program came in, followed by a group of trainees, all closely on her heels. She looked shocked to see me. I was in so early. "Holden, please grab your coat and join us around the table," she said. I grabbed my coat as fast as I could and joined the group in the back of the class. I need to make sure I don't stand out as much. That is important. So what we have here is a Jane Doe found in the Bronx. Of course, at first glance, she looks as though she died from something only internally. She looks as though she is still sleeping. I have, of course, already determined the cause of death without any cutting or removing of any organs or skin. Your job is to work together and figure out how she died. Take your time. She has no immediate kin, and no one but the local police are worried about her remains. I couldn't believe it. She was a Jane Doe. In the few hours that I knew her, I imagined her to have a dedicated group of friends and people who missed her greatly. Maybe they just haven't found who is looking for her? Don't worry, I'll ask her as soon as they leave. I know you are confused. I'll explain it all later. Right now, I need to keep telling you about what happened in that room, about what happened in Morgue Room B. "Holden, do you want to be in my group?" asked Daryl. He was a good guy and got good marks, so why not? "Sure, man, that sounds good. Crazy that she is a Jane Doe, though, right? I never knew how to have a casual conversation with my classmates. I wasn't like the others. They were freaks. I really hope they don't cut her hair for the examination. We both really like it. It was her favorite." Daryl decided that we should stay through lunch to be able to examine her while the others were gone. Maybe the director would see and notice how studious we were. To be honest, I didn't give a shit about that. Daryl, on the other hand, was very interested in being liked. I just wanted as much alone time with her as I could get. I guess I should tell you about what happened after lunch now. The stuff that happened in the middle wasn't that important, and I know you are only interested in the important stuff. While the others were at lunch, Daryl and I slid behind the door, careful to not draw any unwanted attention to us. Daryl, of course, didn't want anyone thinking he was trying to be on the director's good side. As you know, I didn't give a shit about that. I couldn't figure out why I was so drawn to her. It was magnetic. It was carnal. I had never wanted something more. And not in the physical frat boy sense. I wanted to know her. I couldn't stop thinking about her. What was she like before? Who was she with? Who did she like? Would she like me? Daryl spoke and it broke all of my perpetual inner thoughts. Do you ever think about how they died just based on how they look? To be honest, I hadn't even thought about how she died. What do you mean by what they look like? You know, like this girl's a nice, clean-cut girl. So, obviously she wasn't a druggie, she was brought in immediately, and she isn't dirty and roughed up. I don't know, I am assuming that she died of some sort of accidental drug overdose or an undiagnosed heart condition. But the director wouldn't know about the heart condition just from looking at the outside of her, right? Daryl brought up good points. Was she a druggie? No way. I could tell. Not her. I told Daryl, I don't think it is our place to guess before we even do any formal examination. I don't want this to cloud our judgment. If we are going to win this, I gave Daryl a friendly elbow to the side of the ribs. We are going to have to focus. I couldn't believe what happened next. You are going to have a hard time believing it. I wouldn't believe it either. But nonetheless, here we are. Cadavers are usually naked and covered with a thin, non-absorbent sheet. Usually when the sheet is removed, you are exposed to the worst atrocities you could think of. Of course, that never bothered me. Not one bit. But when I removed the sheet, she was different than anything I had ever seen before. No giant wounds, no lesions, no apparent signs of rigor mortis. She was perfect. Porcelain skin, combed hair, no bruises or scratches. Next, I started focusing on my other senses, and then it hit me. Most rooms with cadavers have a certain smell. Not as bad as you would think, thanks to the high-tech refrigeration and chemicals. But there is always the faint smell of death lingering under all the cleaning agents. I hadn't noticed it before when we were alone, but that distant smell was gone and replaced with something familiar, something that I hadn't remembered until now. The smell of gardenia hit me harder than anything I have ever experienced before. I felt my stomach turn, my heart race. I was sweating and breathing heavily. Was it 3 o'clock? Why can't I breathe? Gardenias have a very fragrant smell, floral and bright, which is shocking because it is actually in the coffee family. Okay, I get it. You get it. I'm stalling. She wasn't supposed to smell like this. They have never smelled like this before. This isn't right. Is it 3 o'clock yet? Okay, it's time to focus now. I need to do her examination. Daryl cleared his throat. He was always doing that. I could tell that he noticed that I was in deep trouble. Finally, he spoke. Hey man, I'm actually getting pretty hungry. I'm gonna go grab a lunch tray and meet you back in here. Sounds good, I said. I remember turning my head and looking at her, but this time it was different. The longing was gone and replaced with something much darker. The rage boiled inside me and I couldn't take it. Why would you wear that? Who told you about that? You smell repulsive and corrupt. Believe me, I wanted to think about anything else. I really tried my best. You have to believe me. But I couldn't help it. She made me think about the worst part of me. You know, my mother used to smell aggressively of the flowers she clipped in her garden. Gardenias, roses, lilies, and any other boring, fragrant pieces she could grow, she would wear on her at all times. I have vivid memories of her reading me stories about death and despair while reeking of fragrance. In fact, the last memory of her that I have, my favorite memory of her, involves her smelling of flowers before she took her last breath. Oh, she was surprised, of course. But I guess that story is for another time. I'll tell her, my Jane, when she is ready. Right now, I am focused on who told her to wear this whorish smell. I couldn't help it. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. My mother really ruined me. You know, no matter how hard I tried, she was always there nagging me from the grave. She just wouldn't leave me alone. So, Jane, it is just you and me now. You see, is it okay if I call you that? I have been waiting to be alone with you again because I have so many questions for you. I could feel my rage boiling. How could she do this to me? She and I could have been perfect. You smell like her. She told you, didn't she? She told you what I did? I could hear an alarm go off in the distance. What time was it? I couldn't get my thoughts to stop racing. I was going to do something bad. I could feel it. Listen, Jane, don't be afraid. You did this. You knew what you were doing when you came in here. You got me to be interested in you. You tempted me with your calm demeanor, but you ruined it. I can tell that you talked to my mother. You are working with her. I could feel myself lose it, but I couldn't stop. If you must know, I wasn't going to do what I did. I wanted us to start fresh, to talk and grow our relationship. She messed this up, not me. Honestly, I checked my watch and it was 2:58. I took a deep breath, counted to 10, and drove a scalpel into her chest.